Let's do it!
Well, this is it. This is what everything has led to. I got myself behind them, I fooled them with my disguise, and now I'm perfectly positioned for the play of my life. There's 5 of them up ahead, all running away, not suspecting a single thing to happen. This is exactly what I've trained for. It's showtime. Oh. This is Spy. Or at least was Spy. Unfortunately for him, he is by far the weakest class in all of TF2, and if I'm going to be honest with you, there isn't really much of a competition here. Even though he can go invisible, disguise his enemies, and instantly kill anyone he wants with a backstab, people have sort of caught onto his whole assassin shtick over the years and know how to counter him. It's common knowledge at this point to turn around every so often so he doesn't sneak up on you, you know you gotta spy check every crevice of the map, and for the love of God, you know you shouldn't carelessly follow him up a flight of stairs unless you want to end up in his subpar frag movie. But look, even if he is the weakest class in the game, he still does have the potential to absolutely shut down servers if you play your cards right. With things like trick stab, strafing, good positioning, and situational awareness, Spy can become a very formidable opponent. But unfortunately for me, I can't really do any of that stuff.
You suck!
Even though I have 4,000 hours in this game, I've never really been able to pull off those flashy trick stabs and big brain outplays that all the cool Spy mains can. It takes such a big time investment to learn all the intricacies of Spy's kit, and up until this point in my TF2 career, I'd never really given it much attention, but I wanted to change that. And if you're a long-time viewer of the elmaxo channel here, you'd know that I'm pretty mentally ill when it comes to challenging myself in this 15-year-old video game, so I actually developed a bit of an idea on how I could make my process of becoming the most elite level Spy main a little more interesting. And so, like any normal person would, I decided on the 12th of December 2022 that I was going to dedicate the next 100 days to improving at Spy, and oh boy, was this going to be quite the journey. There were going to be some absolutely insane highs, some equally crushing lows, and god, a whole lot of backstabbing. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my 100 Days of Spy challenge. Before we dive head on into things, there are some parameters I want to implement around this 100-day challenge, because admittedly, it is a little vague. Theoretically, I could just load into a game filled with bots, select Spy for a moment, hit one singular backstab, and do that for over 3 months straight, which probably wouldn't make for the most captivating story. So, there are 2 basic guidelines I have established to make sure I become the most elite level Spy player possible over the next 100 days. Number 1, my hours on Spy have to increase from 80 to 280 by the end of 100 days. Any talented mathematicians in the audience will know that equates to at least 2 hours of Spy gameplay every day for the next 100 days. I figure this is a pretty reasonable amount of time to run with because it's not some insane time commitment that will have me ripping my hair out after a week, but it's also not too little to the point where I won't become an absolute gamer god by the end of 100 days. We can measure this stat using the in-game tracker, which you can access through your loadout, and this makes it really convenient to know if we're on target or not. Now, the second guideline I have to accomplish is getting at least 1,000 kills on every Spy weapon, and when I say every weapon, I mean every weapon. Now, of course, this doesn't include the Invis Watchers or the Sappers, but when it comes to all of Spy's knives and revolvers, I will have at the very least 1,000 kills on each of them once 100 days is up. This will allow me to explore all of Spy's gameplay variety to its fullest, meaning I should emerge from this challenge with a pretty damn comprehensive understanding of how each unlock functions and what scenarios they work best in. This does mean I'll need to get 1,000 kills on the Enforcer at some point, which I'm sure will be an absolute joy to accomplish, but hey, it gives me some sub-goals to progress through as the days pass in this challenge, so hopefully I find that fulfilling in some way. Now, if you don't play much TF2, this meant I was going to have to buy a strange version for all of Spy's weapon, which is a type of item in TF2 that automatically tracks your kills. This does cost a little bit of extra cash, especially when you're a dumbass like me who needs to have a professional kill streak kit on everything, but hey, just like my $500 flog from my 10,000 kills video, we can probably claim this as a tax write-off too. Now, before we get ahead of ourselves, I probably should address the slight elephant in the room. This video, yeah, it's pretty damn long because there's actually a whole lot of interesting stuff to talk about here. But you don't need to worry. I don't expect anyone to finish this video in one sitting because I have broken it up into 10 distinct segments, which means you are free to leave and come back to the video as you please. I hope this means for the next week of your life, I can be your choice of YouTuber when you sit down to eat a meal, and if that's the case, I'm truly honored. I know the length might seem a little daunting, but trust me, I've spent a lot of time making this video as accessible as possible for your viewing entertainment. So, with all of that out the way, it's time we officially begin 100 Days of Spy. I suppose the most logical place to start with the 100-Day Spy Challenge is to, well, give you a rundown on how Spy actually works, because this conniving Frenchman has some pretty complex mechanics that probably don't make a lot of sense to someone who hasn't played the game before, so it's time we take a quick class in Spyology 101. Compared to every other class in TF2, Spy has a really unique playstyle, and if I had to boil it down to one word, it would be Disruptor. This might sound a bit weird, but when you take a look at the different tools he has in his loadout, I think it'll make more sense. Up first, we have the revolver, and this is by far the most normal weapon Spy has available to him. It has 6 bullets in the chamber, it deals a surprisingly good amount of damage at mid to close ranges, and it can be a good final resort to swap to if you ever find yourself in a sticky situation. A lot of Spy players neglect just how powerful this thing is and how useful it can be in certain situations, but I knew I wasn't going to be one of them, and I was fully aware of its potential going into the challenge. It's safe, it's reliable, it's the revolver. Next up, we have the knife. This is the weapon which all of Spy's gameplay centers around, because if we swing this thing at someone, it deals, oh, a very underwhelming 40 damage. That's actually kind of boring. But if we happen to stab someone from behind, well, we can instantly kill any class in the game without fail. This is what makes Spy such a formidable opponent, as you can completely turn the tide in your team's favor with one well-timed backstab on an important enemy player. Backstab is what makes Spy such an enticing class to play, and it's easily the most important mechanic to wrap your head around because all of your utility centers around it. The third tool in Spy's kit is where things start to get really interesting, as we have the Invis Watch. This is what allows Spy to actually get into a position where he can pull a backstab off, as by right clicking, we are granted with 10 seconds of full invisibility. This allows us to flank behind the enemy team and make quick escapes in a pinch, making it absolutely essential to Spy's playstyle. Without it, we'd be stuck metaphorically slamming our head against a brick wall over and over as we try to slip past the entire enemy team without them noticing, which, yeah, doesn't work very well. So the Invis Watch is absolutely vital here. The fourth tool in Spy's kit is the Sapper, which exists solely to counter one class in particular, and that is the Engineer. Any of his buildings, whether it be a sentry, dispenser, or teleporter, can be sapped, which temporarily disables their functionality and slowly decreases their health until it drains all the way down to 0 and self-destructs. When it comes to being a good team player, the Sapper is absolutely essential, as you are the best equipped class in the game to deal with annoying sentry nests that prevent your team from pushing or defending an objective. Overall, the Sapper is less impactful than some of Spy's other tools, but it still has an important job nonetheless. The final tool Spy has at his disposal is the Disguise Kit. It isn't officially listed in his loadout when you go to change your weapons, but it allows us to disguise as anyone on the enemy team, or anyone on our team for that matter, which in conjunction with the Invis Watch allows us to fool our enemies and cause some mayhem on the backline. Whilst veteran players will sniff you out pretty quickly if you happen to have a poor disguise choice, it is still great for blending into your environment and can be super effective against newer players too. So look, in summary, we can assassinate single targets really well, we have a tool that allows us to sneak behind the enemy team with ease, we can disguise as enemies to cause confusion, and we're able to sap important buildings like teleporters and sentry, all with the goal of making it easier for our team to push the objective and ultimately win the game. Now if you ask me, all that seems pretty disruptive, which is why I think the label of Disruptor categorizes Spy's role on the team pretty damn well. Keep in mind though that this is Spy at his absolute simplest. When you start adding things like unlockable weapons and trick stabs into the mix, well, that's how you end up with a video that's over 3 hours long. But for now, and just as a quick little introduction, I hope Spy makes sense to people who haven't really played all that much TF2 before. So okay, with that out the way, I think it's time I give you a little sneak peek into how absolutely talented I was at Spy going into this challenge. You know, it's time you see the absolute trick stabbing god and elite level gaming master I was on day 1 of this challenge, and by that I mean, oh god, oh no, I really sucked hard in the beginning. Now, if for some reason you don't believe me in how utterly garbage at Spy I was, maybe this clip from my literal first game of the entire challenge can help to clarify things. We're here on Barnless, where I'm trying to get behind the enemy team, but oh, I carelessly bump into the medic before decloaking, where I then proceed to miss not just one, not just two, but 3 backstab attempts in a row before receiving a lethal smack to the face by a VB Longneck. I think this is a good place to start with the challenge and my spy gameplay more generally, because the first of many shortcomings I noticed in my skills was my inability to lodge a butterfly knife into an enemy gamer's spinal cord, aka getting a backstab. For some reason, this was the first major hurdle I ran into, and it seems kinda silly to talk about because, well, surely hitting a backstab is a pretty simple task, right? You have your knife, you walk up to their back, you press mouse 1, and voila, that should be a kill. But no, actually, it often wouldn't be, as failing to hit backstabs was the first major issue I struggled with during this challenge. Take a look at this clip from day 5 on Snowy Coast, where I position myself in this nice little spot next to the barrels where the enemy team won't see me. Luckily, a demo man comes around the corner, so I walk up and I absolutely mince both stabs and fucking die. Now look, there's probably a few key reasons as to why I was failing so spectacularly at these seemingly super easy backstabs early on, as 1, I hadn't played all that much Spy before starting this challenge and was a little rusty, 2, I didn't have a good grasp of how the backstab hitbox worked yet, and 3, I struggled to predict how enemies would move around whilst I was behind them. I just didn't have the experience to quickly adjust my own positioning if an enemy suddenly strafed in a different direction, as we saw in that last clip, so I'd often just end up tickling them with a little 40 damage stab to their side, or even worse, I'd miss the stab entirely, meaning I was swinging my knife at literally nothing, which if you didn't know is actually the TF2 equivalent of shooting an airball. This issue did dissipate relatively quickly though, as with each day I'd gain more experience, so I'd shake off a little more of that rust, and I'd become increasingly comfortable with Spy's core mechanics, meaning that fail stabs like this became much more of a rarity. I will admit though that even like 70 days deep into the challenge, I still had moments where I would absolutely butcher a backstab attempt, but again, they were much less frequent than they were in this first week. Now, it would be absolutely lovely if failing the world's easiest backstab attempts was the only issue I ran into in my early days of playing Spy, but unfortunately, I managed to piece together an entire laundry list of things I sucked ass at on Spy, and to introduce you to my next problem, just take a look at another clip I got on day 1, and see if you notice anything strange about it. So you might be thinking, hold on, the clip was a little messy, but there was a pretty decent couple of stabs in there, and your aim with the revolver was actually on point at the end, so what's the issue here? Well, if you take a closer look after my missed stab on the sniper, you'll notice that I pull out my disguise kit for half a second, and then also manage to pull out my sapper before ultimately arriving at my revolver and actually getting the kill. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think that either of these items provide any offensive utility in the middle of combat, unless I plan to throw them at my opponent, so why am I swapping to them in the middle of a battle? Well, that brings us to the next issue in the elmaxo is awful at Spy list, and this one sounds even more stupid than the last because it seemed I was unable to operate my keyboard like a normal human being when I was playing Spy because, oh my god, was I mispressing keys and swapping to the wrong items in the heat of combat so damn consistently. Take a look at this clip from day 2, where I'm on Dust Bowl, and I'm trying to do a little bit of acting to trick an enemy medic into thinking that I'm actually on his team. If you didn't know, you can press B whilst holding a weapon as Spy, and this will swap what your disguise is holding, which can help to make you look more believable depending on what environment you're in. In this case, I press B whilst my sapper is equipped, so that my medic disguise swaps to holding their medigun. But instead of doing that, I managed to fat finger my keyboard and bring up this notification before being randomly critted and sent to fucking purgatory. I can't really say that I wanted to use my secret Saxton whilst I was trying to convince an enemy that I was on their team, but apparently I clumsily pressed the wrong button and got myself murdered as a result. Luckily, this was similar to the fail stabs, as after I played more and more and my muscle memory improved, I was actually able to start swapping to the correct weapon during combat relatively quickly, which helped reduce the amount of embarrassing clips I found myself ending up in. But okay, it wasn't all bad when it came to my first 10 days of this challenge. This is probably a good point to introduce you to one of the most important skills there is to playing Spy, and that is of course trick stabbing. There are a lot of satisfying mechanics in TF2. You got stuff like crit flares, market gardens, crossbows, meat shots, air shots, headshots, ooh! Even saying their names just has your brain absolutely racing. But if there was a mechanic that I could put at the very pinnacle of that list, it'd be trick stabs, because there is just so much variety to what you are able to pull off. As I covered briefly earlier, Spy's whole shtick is that he 1. Gets behind his enemy, and 2. Gives him a good old shank to the back. However, there are situations where you won't be behind your enemy and may in fact be caught out with your metaphorical pants down. In scenarios such as this, you have to delve into your repertoire of trick stabs, which, as the name suggests, are reliant on your ability to trick your opponent into moving a certain way so you can find a way to stab their back. There is an ocean of different trick stabs which you can execute, including stair stabs, jump stabs, under stabs, corner stabs, blind stabs, matador stabs, reverse matador stabs, drop stabs, circle strafe stabs, surf stabs, stab rad plaid. It is seriously insane how much complexity there is to something which seems so innately simple, and if there was one skill I absolutely wanted to master over the next 100 days of this challenge, it was going to be my ability to hit any and every type of trick stab, because ooh, does it feel good outwitting your opponent. And look, prior to starting this challenge, I could hit the occasional trick stab. I say the one I would most consistently land is a corner stab, which, as the name suggests, is where an enemy is hunting you down as you go around a corner, so you vanish from their sightline for a moment, just for you to reappear as you loop back around behind them to secure a really nice, simple stab. It's a very reliable trick stab, and in these early days of the challenge especially, I would always try to force myself into situations where I could pull it off, because it was the one I was most confident in landing consistently. I was getting a fair few of them, but look, when it came to every other type of trick stab, I was a bit more inconsistent in these early days. I think the absolute funniest type of failed trick stab to go back and watch had to be my stair stab attempts, because oh boy, were there some absolutely awful clips to cycle through. In case you don't know, a stair stab is one of the most quintessential tools in Spy's repertoire, so it's important I break them down for you real quick. They are entirely reliant on you having a slight height advantage over your opponent, so you can jump and crouch over their head as they approach you, leading you straight to their back for one of the more flashy types of stabs that Spy can pull off. As the name suggests, you'll usually do these at a staircase or a ramp as an enemy rushes to get you, but you can pull them off from anywhere as long as you have that tiny height advantage over your opponent. And when I say tiny, I mean it, because a teleporter is technically enough of a high ground for you to be able to jump on top of your opponent and get a stab. Now again, these are always super sick to pull off, but unfortunately, in these early days, I wasn't all that great at it. Here on day 2, I was attacking on Swiftwater when a pyro caught me off guard as I decloaked. So they began chasing me up these stairs, and wow, I definitely tried to do something there. Instead of jumping on top of him to get a backstab as I landed, I kind of just jumped away from him, which isn't particularly conducive to getting a kill. I think I put it best in my live reaction when I said, oh, I fucked that trick stab so bad, someone put me on a watch list for bad trick stabbers. And take a look again here on day 2, where we are on high pass, and I catch an engineer walking towards me. There isn't too much time to react, so I figure, well, the stair stab is probably the only thing that will work here, and oh, okay, I jumped away from him and tried to flick back and stab, nothing. Just like literally everything I've mentioned up until this point, learning to hit trick stabs started off very rough. I will admit that there was the occasional glimpse of improvement where I'd whip out some insane stair stab or matador that I didn't even know I was capable of hitting, but for the most part, it was a lot of failure. It didn't really upset me or make me frustrated though, because I recognized that there was going to be a lot of learning to do, so it was inevitable that I was going to jump too soon on a stair stab or strafe too far in one direction on a matador and find myself getting absolutely destroyed as a result. There's definitely a whole lot more to talk about when it comes to trick stabs, and it's actually one of the biggest focuses of this entire video, but we'll see a lot more of that in the later days as I actually improved, because for now, well, it was by no means a strong suit of mine. But look, I did realize something pretty quickly in my first 10 days, and that was that you don't always have to go for a trick stab as Spy. Now don't get me wrong, they're super fun to execute, but one thing I was painfully aware of going into this challenge was that some Spy players just overuse them way too much. Just because you have the option of doing it doesn't mean you should take it, and as I realized, it's often a lot smarter to forego using your knife entirely in certain situations, and instead, you really should be using that trusty old revolver. Luckily, one of the transferable skills I had going to this challenge was, my aim. I know it sounds pretty obvious, but when you play a game for over 4,000 hours, you kinda get good at the whole pointing and clicking at enemies shtick. As a byproduct of this, I really found myself making the most of my revolver throughout the early days of this challenge, as if I wasn't confident in my ability to get behind and actually hit a stab, I always had this surprisingly consistent form of damage that I could fall back on. I realized that people really underestimate how much work you can put in with the stock revolver, as this thing can do up to 60 damage per shot at closer ranges, which has the potential to absolutely obliterate opponents who don't respect you in the 1v1. As you can see here on day 9, I find a soldier on Swiftwater who has the direct hit equipped, aka a weapon which can kill me with literally one rocket, but I back myself and end up connecting 5 shots in a row on him to secure the kill, and also get this random invis spy after. In this other clip I got on day 1 on Upward, I take a pretty big gamble when I decide to target this scout coming towards me. I'm on 81 HP, which is by no means an optimal amount against a scattergun, which can instantly delete me, but again, because I have faith in my aim, I'm able to pick up a kill on on this scout too, even though it does go down to the wire. Look, I was definitely having most of my fun whilst hitting backstabs, and they're so much more satisfying when you're playing Spy, but a common trap I see a lot of newer players falling into is forgetting that their revolver exists entirely. It really does deal a stupid amount of damage if your aim is on point, and a lesson I learned super quickly whilst playing Spy in these early days is that if you don't have full faith in your ability to whip out some super complicated 360 triple C-tap Matador trick stab on an opponent, then don't. You have a super reliable option in the revolver at your disposal, so you may as well make the most of it. And look, whilst we're on the topic of discussing the tools in our kit, I think it's time we shine a bit of a spotlight on the stock knife and how it went during these early days. Going into the challenge, I've honestly never been the biggest fan of the stock knife, just because there are so many more fun options like the Kunai and Big Earner, which actually reward you when you hit a stab. I'll talk about these unlocks in depth later on, but what I've always found to be so underwhelming with the knife is that you'll head on into a situation, secure one stab or maybe two if you're lucky, and then you'll be left with your dick in your hands, as you won't have a speed boost or bonus health, making it really hard for you to escape, and you'll often just be left getting executed on the spot. And to be honest with you, I experienced this a lot in my early days of the challenge. Take a look at this clip from day 1 on Swiftwater, where I declick pretty aggressively at their spawn before securing an easy stab on a clueless sniper. However, because backstabbing has a super loud audio cue of your enemies screaming as they die, both the soldier and the enemy spy instantly snap towards me and promptly kill me. And again, look at this clip from day 9 on Thunder Mountain, where I get a nice stab on this pyro just for the demo night, another pyro to quickly react and prevent me from getting any more kills. Now yes, an element to me dying so quickly here is because they are some fairly aggressive stabs I'm going for. In an ideal world, I should be waiting patiently for isolated targets so I can pick them off without anyone noticing and then falling back into the shadows to repeat the process. But come on, that's boring as fuck. I just want to go on a bloody rampage through the enemy team in a moment of pure chaos before finally being caught and going out with a bang back to the respawn queue. I will admit that this is definitely something I got better at in the later days of the challenge, as I slowly became way more observant of my surroundings and seeing which enemies were nearby before I went for a big play, meaning I had more information on hand and could make an optimal decision better. But I'm just saying, if I had the Kunai equipped in either of those clips we just watched, I could have a nice little health boost, which makes escaping a much easier task. But again, we'll be talking about that specific unlock a lot more later on. What really solidifies my whole point here about getting 1 or 2 stabs with the stock knife and then dying is all of my chain stab clips. Now basically, if I ever hit anything that was even remotely noteworthy for the video, I'd make sure to record it, and this was the case when it came to chain stabs. But as I was organizing my footage, I realized that in my first 10 days of playing, I noticed there literally wasn't a single chain with more than 3 stabs in it, and the vast majority of them were only double kills. Now I know this probably doesn't sound that insane, but when you compare it to the 4, 5, and even 6 kill chains I was getting fairly consistently with some of the other knives later on in the challenge, I was actually pretty damn surprised. Now this wasn't entirely the fault of the stock knife, as this was also a byproduct of me having less experience on Spy this early on. I'm sure if I used the stock knife more later on in the challenge, I probably would have started getting some of those bigger chain kills too, but the lack of utility it provides upon getting a stab, it did leave me feeling slightly underwhelmed at times. Of course though, it still did a pretty decent job for the first stretch of the challenge. It was definitely a good way to start things off, as it didn't have any of the gimmicks that the other unlocks do, which helped me to direct my full focus to the fundamentals like positioning, good movement, and understanding back hitboxes early on. I will admit that it did make me realize pretty quickly that my preferred playstyle on Spy was going to be really aggressive, as the prospect of using the stock knife and patiently waiting around for isolated targets, it didn't seem as appealing to me as dropping myself into ungodly situations filled with enemy gamers and trick stabbing my way out with the kunai. Whilst we are on the topic of the stock knife though, I should let you know that I actually hit the first major milestone of the challenge on day 6, where I secured 1,000 kills on my strange knife. This was the very first weapon of mine to hit this secondary goal we have in the challenge, leaving me with 9 more weapons to go. Now to finish off my discussion of the first 10 days of this challenge, I want to talk to you a little bit more about the Invis Watch, and specifically my pathing with it. The way you maneuver the map whilst invisible as Spy is one of the most important skills to wrap your head around, as it's crucial to actually getting yourself behind the enemy team so you can start to do all of your disruptive work. It's honestly a super underrated element to Spy's gameplay loop, as people usually over-obsess with practicing all the different types of flashy trick stabs they can pull off, meaning that they overlook fundamentals such as pathing. So with this in mind, I decided to make a concerted effort to focus on this part of my Spy gameplay from the beginning. I wanted to know the best routes to take on every map, find hidden paths, manage my cloak time well, and know every ammo location to ensure I was getting behind the enemy team in the most optimal way possible. But, yeah, like everything in this challenge besides my revolver aim so far, it started off a little rough. Take a look at this clip here on day 2, where, count with me, I managed to bump into not just 1, not just 2, not just 3, not just 4, but 5 people whilst invisible. Nothing screams good invis pathing like colliding with literally half the enemy team before you manage to get behind. Now, I will admit that some maps do make getting behind the enemy team as spy a pretty big challenge, and I'll talk about that in depth later in the video, don't you worry, but for the most part, getting better at my invis pathing was just a case of trial and error to find which routes worked best and testing how aggressive I could be whilst I was trying to get behind, meaning I found myself getting caught out a lot. It's also important to note that before going into the challenge, I was so used to running the Latrange, which is a revolver that extends your cloak duration by 40%, meaning I was used to having way more wiggle room and extra cloak time to work with when maneuvering the map whilst invisible. However, because I was running vanilla spy for the first 10-day block of the challenge, it meant I had a lot of adjusting to, and found myself needing ammo packs to replenish my cloak meter way more often, and would sometimes find myself in pretty undesirable situations where I wouldn't have enough cloak duration left to escape. Anyway, whilst I was failing miserably a lot in these first 10 days of the challenge, I actually was having a really good time learning through my mistakes and optimizing my gameplay as I progressed day after day. I genuinely found myself looking forward to each session as I was slowly improving things like my trick stabs, positioning, and general game awareness. I can't lie, I'm a big fan of progressing and getting better at things with time, so even though there was the occasional frustrating moment here or there, I was very much happy with these first 10 days and was looking forward to the rest of the challenge. By the end of day 9, I had accumulated a total of 2,082 kills and died 1,138 times, leading me to a KD of 1.83, which is actually a lot higher than I initially expected. I will mention it here because it's pretty important to the video, but yes, after every single game I played in this challenge, I would alt-tab to a Google Doc and write down my KD for the game, which was a slight pain in the ass, but it meant we'd be able to look at the different trends in my performance as I swapped between different loadouts and slowly got better at the game. I probably did screw up the numbers from time to time and might have forgotten to write down my KD from a handful of games, but overall, this is going to give us a pretty good objective metric for how much I was improving at spy as the challenge progressed. My spy time also increased from 79 hours and 39 minutes up to 100 hours and 7 minutes, meaning I clocked in just over 20 hours of gameplay in my first 10 days. I will say that 2 hours of in-game time on my spy statistics was shaping up to be more like 3 hours of total time spent playing, which would end up being a slightly bigger time commitment than I wanted later on in the challenge, but hey, that's something we can laugh at me about when I'm losing my mind on like day 70. I'm actually so angry. I can't do this. I can't. I'm sick of this game. I'm sick of this game. I don't want to play spy. I play spy every day. I don't want to play spy every day. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. So look, it was honestly a pretty boring start to the challenge. Yes, it was funny to watch me fail miserably with vanilla spy at times, but overall, it basically went just as I imagined it would. I will say though that the pace of this challenge was about to shift pretty drastically from here on out, as moving into the next 10 days of the challenge, well, we were going to make some pretty important changes to both my loadout and playstyle, and this was going to introduce a little more spice into the mix. Hold on. You're telling me you've made it this far into the video and you haven't even joined the official elmaxo Discord server yet? You're kidding me, right? One of the single most active TF2 communities on the entire internet, and you're not in it? Well, look, maybe I can forgive you just this once, but you have to join quickly because we are going to be giving away an Australian knife in honor of this video. All you got to do is go down to the description, join with the link there, or you can go to discord.gg/elmaxo and head to the giveaways chat, where you literally just have to press one button and you're in the running to win that knife. I'm looking to give away a bunch more stuff in the future, and I'm going to do it all through my Discord server, which is just a cool place to meet people and talk if you want to join there. So I'd recommend you do that. Also, before we get back to the video, I really need you to follow me on Instagram. I need clout. I live for clout, and I need the clout to pick up e-girls. So if you go to Instagram and go at elmaxo_swag and you follow me there, I'd really appreciate that. I'd really appreciate it. Sorry. Let's get back to the video. If you're familiar with TF2 culture, you'll know that there's a certain archetype associated with spy mates. They're seen as toxic, people think they have big egos, they often type in chat a lot, they'll usually have an anime profile picture, their weapon names will be either esoteric bullshit or Japanese characters, they wear a certain type of cosmetic loadout, and they use graphic configs that make their game look more like Minecraft than a first-person shooter. But this all doesn't really mean that much. At the end of the day, it comes down to their gameplay. And if there's one knife spy mains can't get enough of, it has to be the Conniver's kunai. Like look, if you go into YouTube right now and take a peek at literally any spy montage that you can find, you'll notice two things immediately. One, are they intentionally making their game's visuals look as dogshit as possible? And two, they'll be using the kunai. I can almost guarantee it, as unless they're an absolute giga chad using the big earner, it'll be kunai, kunai, and a little bit more kunai. And when you take a a look at this weapon's stats, it becomes pretty clear why. The first thing you'll notice is that we lose 55 of our max health, bringing us from the normal HP of a light class, 125, down to a squeamish 70. This is the lowest base health any class can have in the game, and it's a really scary amount to be at, because you are so incredibly vulnerable to literally every form of damage there is. Meat shots, dead. Pipes, dead. Well-placed sticky or rocket, dead. Happen to lose like 5 health due to fall damage whilst you're getting behind the enemy team and are now on the receiving end of a melee swing? Yeah, you guessed right. Dead. You're already a glass cannon as Spy, so you'd hope that there's a pretty damn good upside to the Kunai if we're making ourselves even more fragile, and oh boy, there absolutely is, because for every backstab we get, we absorb our enemy's health. Kinda like we're a vampire. Sorry, I've been wanting to make a Playboy Cardi joke somewhere in the video for a while now, so I'll move on. Anyway, a successful backstab can give us an overheal of up to 210 HP, aka more health than a soldier. Now, the amount of healing or overhealing you get does depend on your opponent's HP. For example, if you stab a full health heavy, you'll be rewarded with the maximum of 210 HP, but if you stab something like a 1 HP scout, you'll only be rewarded with the minimum amount of 75, resulting in a smaller amount of overheal. This allows for some super flashy plays where we can surf enemy rockets because of the overheal, we can go for hyper aggressive stabs in situations we'd usually die in, and we just have so much more sustain in general whilst we're on the battlefield. So God, okay, for the next 10 days of this challenge, it was finally time to say goodbye to the stock knife and hello to the kunai. It sounds like we could have potentially just gotten our hands one of the best weapons in the game, so let's see how it all goes. Well, it may come as a surprise, but those guys on YouTube pulling off all those crazy ass plays have like thousands of hours on Spies, and I don't. So unfortunately, we weren't all that crash hot when I first equipped the kunai on day 10, but I didn't magically gain the ability to perfectly trick stab every enemy I came across overnight. I think the first major issue I noticed with the kunai was that it exacerbated my bad pathing issues, especially when invisible. Now, it's bad enough when you're using the stock knife and happen to get caught out, but with the kunai, well, we've lost an additional 55 HP, making us even easier to be punished. Take a look at this clip from day 13, where I'm pushing forward on Pier. I'm invisible, no one can see me, and oh, hello, that's just a little unfortunate, isn't it? 20% damage resistance you get whilst invisible isn't going to be helping you when you cop a rocket to the face at point blank. And take a look here at this clip on day 19, where we are on Harvest, where if I had to guess, I was trying to get into a position to spawn camp the enemy, but nope. That's a soldier shooting a rocket as they leave spawn for no apparent reason. Look, I realized pretty quickly that I had to be even more careful with my pathing whilst invisible if I was using the kunai, because the potential to get absolutely shafted by some random explosion and just instantly die was so comically high. I had to be even more disciplined with the routes I took, I need to be more patient when moving past enemies, and I basically relegated myself to the flanks exclusively, where it's less likely you'll be randomly greeted by a max damage rocket from a fresh install soldier. And look, a point I'm really going to hammer in throughout this video is that I am just not a fan of all the external factors which are outside of your control when you're playing Spy, and to me, I felt like the kunai just piled on top of this. Like, oh, you're about to hit a backstab, but the enemy turned around at the last frame? Well, before if you were just using the knife, you had a small chance of escaping with your life, but now, no, you'll just die in one shot to basically anything. Are pyros spy checking like a bunch of schizos who haven't taken their, what medication do schizophrenics take? Haloperidol? Well, again, if you're using the knife, you had more wiggle room with that extra HP to escape, with some good movement and unpredictable pathing, but the kunai, yeah, it just makes all of that so much harder. But look, there's a reason it's the go-to choice for spy mains, and I could see the occasional glimpse of this weapon's potential. I think the most useful aspect to the kunai in these early days was the fact it gave me a much safer escape option after I managed to secure a stab. Because it was going to be a while before I could consistently chain together trick stabs and tear through bigger groups of enemies with the kunai, more often than not, I just count my lucky stars if I was even able to secure a single stab, and then use the additional health to safely exit from a fight. Take a look at this clip from day 10 on Frontier, where I'm approaching this pyro and get taken down to a scarily low amount of HP, but luckily secure the stab, which gives me a beautiful 162 overheal, meaning I can take a bunch of the extra damage from the enemies behind me and can exit combat safely. Had I been using the stock knife here, I still would have gotten the stab, but would have had absolutely no hope of escaping past that. And again, this clip from the same day on Badwater, I hit a pretty damn clean drop stab on this heavy, which makes me take the maximum overheal of 210, giving me a massive safety net to escape with. But look, sometimes I was feeling myself and actually had faith in my ability as a spy player. I was like Squidward from that one episode of SpongeBob where the little fish dude asks for extra onions on his Krabby Patty, so he says, "Daring today, aren't we?" Because we can flip that health buff from a useful escape tool into an excuse to try and stab as many people as possible, before we kick the bucket. I think my favorite clip which exemplifies this so beautifully came on day 15 on Barnblitz, where I flank behind the cart and I'm in position to secure an easy chain stab, but unfortunately, this one sniper with the Tribalman's shiv wants nothing to do with it, so he smacks me and I start bleeding, so I stab the soldier to get a massive overheal, just for him to smack me another 2 times before I kill his pyro friend, just for him to smack me again before I kill his other pyro friend, then he smacks me again, so with my 160 HP overheal, I decide to gun him down too, and throw in a laugh taunt for good measure. Just to recap there, this sniper hit me for a total of 5 times in this one clip, but because I had the kunai and was able to keep refreshing my HP with every stab I got, I'm able to just ignore him entirely as I continue to murder more and more of his teammates. Take a look at this other clip I got on Barnblitz 2, where I grab a quick stab on the sniper, then get the medic, and because I'm at the maximum amount of overheal, I managed to tank 200 damage without dying before stabbing these 2 soldiers. It's clips like these which made me understand why so many people hate playing against the kunai, as if you're trying your damn hardest to kill a spy just for your clueless teammates to continually present their back on a silver platter to him so he can absorb their entire health bar, it can get pretty damn frustrating pretty quick. I don't want to jump around the timeline too much, but on day 69 of the challenge, nice, yep, I know, I was dueling a fully overhealed enemy kunai spy. I hit him 3 times with the diamond back to get him down to, oh, no way, 69 HP again, what a coincidence. Just for him to get the easiest stair stab of his life on a clueless soldier from my team, meaning his health is all the way back up to 210, putting me at a major disadvantage from no fault of my own. I was definitely understanding why people hate it, but luckily for everyone I was versing, I wasn't that good with it, yet, and wasn't causing too much mayhem this early on. A prime example of this lack of mayhem I'm causing can be seen when it comes to harder chain stabs. As I was saying before, if people are simply offering me their back, getting ridiculous kill streaks with the kunai isn't that hard, but when I have to trick stab my way through multiple competent enemies, look, things came crashing down pretty damn quick. In this clip on day 15, I'm on Borneo with a nice overheal from a stab I got earlier, so I say fuck it, let's get some trick stabs. I walk up to this demo, stab him once straight to the face, then again, then I try to circle back the other way, then I give up on the demo entirely and move over to the sniper, and I'm promptly put in my place. Or here on day 13, where we're on the absolute best map in the game, CP Steel, where I pick up 3 easy stabs in a row, then have an absolutely pitiful stair stab attempt before awkwardly strafing towards the medic and having my hopes and aspirations ended by a random crit from the amputator. But look, even with moments like this, I was definitely preferring the kunai to the knife, even if I wasn't playing any better. There's going to be some growing pains as I adjusted to the lower initial health, but I was seeing the insane potential that this weapon had, even if I couldn't fully unlock it just yet. By day 15, I hit 1,000 kills on the kunai, meaning it was the second weapon we could tick off the list, but similar to how I kept using the knife even after I got it to 1,000 kills in that first block of the challenge, I decided to stick with the kunai because I was having a great time with it and definitely wanted to improve at using it. Also, before we dive too far into this block of the challenge, I want to talk a bit about the revolver here. I noticed that the rate at which I got revolver kills reduced dramatically when I swapped to the kunai, and it actually makes a lot of sense why. Going from 125 HP with the knife to 70 HP with the kunai puts you at a massive disadvantage in 1v1s with the revolver because you're just that much more squishy and vulnerable, and as a result, I didn't find myself going for all that many revolver plays in this block of the challenge. You might be thinking, well, what if you successfully got a stab and have overheal? Wouldn't you want to use the revolver then? And the answer is, well, no. I realize that you want to keep the overheal chain going for as long as possible with the kunai, meaning as soon as you secure one stab and have a massive overheal, you should be hunting down that next stab to keep your HP constantly topped up in perpetuity. It's usually just not the most optimal play to swap to your revolver and gun people down when you could be farming as much overheal as possible to keep yourself alive for as long as possible. It was really only in very niche circumstances that I found myself using the revolver when I had the kunai equipped, like when versing a scout, a class which is especially hard to trick stab because of the movement speed, or if someone was backpedaling as I fought them and I didn't have enough time to strafe into a position to pull off a trick stab. With that being said, it's still a solid option with how consistent it is, but I just don't think it synergizes particularly well with the kunai. I'd often just feel a lot more pressure to actually land my shots because of how low my base health was, and I just lose 1v1s more often. But hey, this is a problem most of Spy's revolvers run into when paired with the kunai. Well, except for one, but more on that guy later. We also ended up getting 1,000 kills with the revolver on day 18, making it the third weapon in our arsenal that we could officially tick off the list. Now, in a very abrupt change of pace, I want to let you in on one of the biggest discoveries I made during this section of the challenge, and that is, oh my god, are some maps designed horrifically for Spy. As I was getting more and more experience with Spy and playing the same maps over and over, I subconsciously take note of the ones I'd perform well on, and the ones I'd get my ass handed to me on. For example, a map I was starting to absolutely fall in love with during this challenge was Frontier. There's a lot of reasons for this. Firstly, I love the aesthetic of the map. It's beautiful, I love the sections you can fall off, I love the idea of pushing up this massive hill, and the custom cart is just the cherry on top. Secondly, and more importantly, boy are there some beautiful flank paths. For just about every section of the map, there is a fantastic way of getting behind your enemy without running into too many obstacles. On first, you can head round the right through the tunnel, on second, you've got this container and indoor section to maneuver through, and on last, you probably have my favorite flank path in the entire game, and no, I'm not even being hyperbolic. If you're defending, you can get yourself on this rock and jump into this elevated section for perhaps the most useful way of getting behind your enemy in all of TF2. The amount of backstabs I accrued by abusing the shit out of this flank was absolutely insane, especially when I swapped over to the dead ringer later in the video. Frontier also has a bunch of verticality to it, giving you a lot of spots for drop stabs and stair stabs, and to top it all off, it's pretty damn long, meaning you can get some high scoring games in it. It's great, it's fantastic, it's so much fun, it's Frontier, and I love it. Now, there's another side of the spectrum. You know, the maps that suck shit to play as Spy, and there are three in particular I want to talk about. First off is Gold Rush. Usually, I don't have that much to say about this map. It's not great, it's pretty choke heavy, but if I'm playing Soldier or Demo Man, it can be a bunch of fun to spam it. However, as I played Spy, I started to notice some glaring issues. If you're defending as Spy and the attacking team captures the first point, you have absolutely zero flank routes of getting behind. There's this elevated section on the left, which is obviously too high to get to, and there's also this drop down, which, unless you're Michael Jordan and have a 4-meter vertical jump, you're not going to be getting to it anytime soon. That leaves us with one route to get behind, and it's this tight-ass corridor that can barely fit 3 people through it. Why? Do you know how hard it is to get to the enemy team's teleporters or just get in a generally good position for some stabs? When you have this much room to work with, you'll get bounced around like a pinball if you try to cloak your way through this hallway, as you'll usually come across the entire enemy team as they funnel through it. But okay, whatever. It probably gets better on the next stage of the map, right? Well, let's say we start defending again, the attacking team captures first, so you are left with, count with me, 0 flanks again! Just like the first stage, it's too high to get into this window or onto this balcony. I will give credit where credit is due though, as if you want to get behind on this map, you actually get a choice of 2 cramped hallways that will lead to your imminent death if you bump into someone, rather than just the one we had on the first stage, so how good is that? Okay, well surely on the final stage of Gold Rush, we'll get a nice route to flank behind from, right? Well, let's take a look, why don't we? Again, let's say you're defending and the enemy team is captured first. What do we have to work with? Well, if we go to the left flank, yep, that's another drop down we can't access, and if we go to the right flank in the cave under the map, oh, yep, another drop down we can't access. There is one saving grace on this stage of the map, as even though the choke point is really tight to get through, you do have the added bonus of being able to jump onto these beams, which reduces your chance of bumping into someone and makes it a bit easier to get behind. But oh my god, playing Spy on Gold Rush defense is just a pain in the ass. It becomes a roll of the dice as to whether or not you get through the choke point without bumping into someone, and that's a gamble I don't want to take when I have like a million other things to be worrying about as Spy. Now luckily, if you're playing on offense on Gold Rush, all these flanks you couldn't reach on defense are now easily accessible, making it a much more pleasant experience. But honestly, I'm not a big fan of having my class suck shit for half the game whilst I'm waiting to swap team. I don't know if it's because my playstyle in TF2 has always revolved around abusing flank routes no matter what class I'm on, and I'm just sounding like a massive bitch baby right now, but god, there were just a handful of maps which I absolutely despised playing on. Voodoo had similar issues, Dust Bowl had similar issues, Bomb Blitz had some sections which were a pain, and even a Koth map like Viaduct was pretty bad in this regard. Usually, King of the Hill is known for its wide open areas with lots of flank routes, but when you take a look at Viaduct, you notice you have to funnel through the center of the map to get behind. This is partially fixed in the pro version of the map, which adds this little connecting hallway on the side, but look, I didn't manage to play any product during this challenge, so I was left with regular old stinky Viaduct. But alright, I kind of feel like an old man yelling at clouds right now, so let's quit all the whining about stupid old maps in this stupid old game, because it's time to talk about something much more exhilarating, much more exciting, and much more, electrifying when it comes to Spy. As I'd been practicing more, my trick stabs were starting to get a bit more consistent at this point in the challenge. Nothing all that crazy, but I did find myself really enjoying a more simple, but still super satisfying type of trick stab, and that was the drop stab. As the name suggests, a drop stab involves us falling from a higher position down to a lower one to stab somebody. It's by no means a mechanically demanding stab to pull off, as the only skill required is to make sure you time your jump right so you don't accidentally fall in front of them, but even if it is relatively easier to do, that doesn't make it any less satisfying. To be honest with you, I don't even know what it is specifically that makes them so fun to pull off. Is it the setup it requires? Is it the velocity at which you fall at? Is it the fact that your enemy doesn't see it coming? I'm not entirely sure, but what I do know is that when I launch myself off the rocks at Badwater first, down onto some unsuspecting engineer, I feel like Corvo Otano from Dishonored pulling off a clean-ass drop assassination on the gloomy streets of Dunwall. Now, as a drop stab connoisseur myself, who had a whole 20 days of experience under their belt at this point, I must tell you that there are two types of drop stab. One, there's the basic type I've been talking about so far, but two, there's also the more complex drop stab where you have to quickly adapt to the situation at hand. For example, take a look at this clip on day 10, where I'm on upward and decloak to see if I can get a stab on this heavy eating their sandwich. I walk up and unfortunately for me that back hitbox is not going to line up, so I give them a disapproving shake of my head before retreating to the window and jumping out to escape, only to realize there's a pyro below me, so I quickly spin around to be facing his back and pull off a quick reactive drop stab. Or here on the same day, where we're pushing last on Badwater, I drop down from the high ground only to see a heavy respawning, so I quickly readjust to bounce off the railings into this sort of drop stab, stare stab hybrid. There's honestly so much creativity to be had here when it comes to drop stabs, with all the spins, different heights you can jump from, and quick reactive plays you can pull off, which is what made it my favorite type of stab as Spy in these early stages of the challenge. It may not always be the most mechanically impressive thing to pull off, but that doesn't stop them from being a whole lot of fun. Now to wrap things up for this second block of the challenge, I gotta tell you something, because there's an elephant in the room I've been avoiding. Things might appear to be going relatively smoothly so far, and for the most part, they have been. However, there has been a slight thorn in my side, and when I say thorn, I mean flamethrower. To be honest, I don't even know where to start with the spy checking. I'm gonna use every ounce of my self-control I have here to keep this segment short, because I know if I were given the opportunity to ramble into my mic about spy checking for 3 hours, I would take it in a heartbeat, and this video would be even longer than it has to be. So, okay, let's keep it concise. Spy checking fucking sucks. I know, really controversial take when you have to play Spy for 100 days, but oh god, was it driving me up the walls, and we were only 20 days into the challenge so far. The first thing to note here is that when you hit a backstab, it makes a loud ass audio cue of your enemy screaming, which everyone can hear. Take a look at this clip on Upward, where we get a nice and simple stab on this heavy, just for the pyro to snap around and burn us to a crisp. And that's the first problem we run into. The next thing to note here is that playing well is actually to your own detriment as Spy. As any other class in the game, the better you play, well, the better you do. More kills, more points, more assists, more whatever. It makes logical sense, right? But playing well as Spy unlocks something primal in the enemy team, because the more and more backstabs you get, the more and more paranoid your opponents will become. You kill somebody once, no big deal. They might turn around a couple times as they respawn. You kill somebody twice, well, now you've annoyed them a little. They'll be on the front line minding their own business until suddenly they'll start spinning to check if you're around. You kill somebody 3 times, that's the point of no return, because that's when you start seeing rage pyros come out. Take a look at this clip from later in the challenge on day 70. We're on Barn Blitz, and I get behind the enemy team to secure a stock standard stab on this sniper. There was no trick stab, no taunt, nothing that could possibly aggravate this guy in any capacity, right? Well, I die, respawn, get myself behind the enemy team again, and look who it is. Our good sniper friend has swapped to Pyro and has now decided his sole mission in life is to burn me to a crisp. And look, if you haven't played much TF2 before, Pyro is the go-to class for countering Spy. Because of the way fire particles work, Pyros can cover large areas with their flamethrower better than basically any other weapon in the game, which makes them well suited for checking if there are any invisible spies about. You know, you'll be minding your own business, just trying to flank behind whilst invisible until, some schizo Pyro has other plans for you and will check every pixel of the map to ensure you are unable to help your team in any meaningful capacity. And on top of this, I was running the Kunai for this segment of the challenge, which means if I hadn't got a stab yet and was on a very healthy 70 HP, a random flame particle touching me whilst invisible was a certain death sentence. Take a look at this clip from day 18 on Borneo, where I am simply minding my own business just for Dumb and Dumber to show up spy checking every section of the map. They come around the corner, my ass is clenched as I'm praying to just about every god that there is that I make it out of this one alive, and luckily, it appears we will live another day. Until what? There is no way those fire particles traveled that far and actually hit me. I just refuse to believe for a second that those actually made contact with me. And look, sometimes the incessant spy checking would just be too much for me, as it was in this clip on Upward, and the only solution was jumping off the map so I don't give them an extra kill for their strange weapon. Is it petty to do that? Perhaps. Am I proud about it? Not really. Would I do it again though? Absolutely. Anyway, I gotta keep this section short, but this all came to its climax on day 16, where after a flog pyro snapped immediately and burnt me to the ground, I had enough. Oh my, I'm leaving. I'm off. I'm not even bothering with that. Spy checking was going to be a persistent issue for the next 80 days. Unlocks like the Dead Ringer and even the Spicicle would change its dynamic a little bit, but look, I just want to get out my frustration here so we can move forward onto greener pastures. By the end of this 10-day block, I had accumulated 1,812 kills and died 1,055 times, meaning I had a KD of 1.72. Though this is still a pretty damn good KD, it was a decrease from my first 10 days, but honestly, I think it makes sense since there is a much sharper learning curve with the Kunai, and I had to adapt to having a lower base HP. My spy time increased from 100 hours and 7 minutes to 116 hours and 17 minutes for a total of just over 16 hours in the second 10-day block. This was a decrease and actually put me 4 hours behind schedule of reaching 280 total hours, but given we were only a fifth of the way through the challenge at this point, I wasn't really sweating it. So for the most part, things had been traveling relatively well. We were adapting to new challenges and slowly improving, so I was feeling pretty good about how things had progressed. But for the next 10-day block, things were about to change after one failed stair stab attempt. What? Where am I?
He's finally waking up. Doctor, where are you?
What's going on in here?
Elmaxo, can you hear me? Are you awake?
Yeah, who are you?
I'm Dr. Harrison from the 2 Private Hospital. I'm here to help.
Wait, a hospital? Am I okay? What's happened?
We're not entirely sure. There were reports from the scene that you suddenly collapsed after hitting an absolutely filthy stair step on Badwater. Nice, by the way.
Oh god, I blacked out?
Yeah, so you were rushed here, and we ran some brain scans, and, well, I don't know how to tell you this, but we found something slightly concerning.
What? What did you find, Doctor? What could it possibly be?
Well, the CT scans revealed an abnormal growth next to your amygdala.
Doctor, no, don't tell me. Do I have a tumor?
No. Unfortunately, it's even worse. You have stage 1 of what we call spy brain rot.
No, this can't be, Doctor, please. It's only been 20 days. How can this happen?
Sir, please calm down. We'll give you the best treatment we have. You can make it out of this, Max. All hope isn't lost yet.
No, I don't think you understand. I'm a soldier, man. I love soldier. Get me out of here. I need to play soldier now.
Nurse! 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 I need your help. We have to restrain him.
No, let go of me. No, please, Doctor. No. Moving into days 20 to 29 of this challenge, I came to a very scary realization. I was starting to indulge in all the toxic tendencies of spy mains. You remember all the way back at the start of the video, I talked about the certain stereotypes associated with spy plays, and going into this third block of the challenge, I realized that I was starting to adopt more and more of these characteristics. Let me just give you some examples. There are 2 ways specifically that I noticed the spy brain rot was seeping into my system, and the first of which was b-hopping. Now, to be honest with you, this isn't a mechanic you hear a whole lot about in TF2, as it's much more prominent in Valve's less neglected and more popular older brother, Counter-Strike, where b-hopping has a dedicated community behind it. The TLDR of b-hopping is that it's reliant on 2 factors about the source engine. 1, you gain a small amount of speed when you airstrafe, and 2, if you time your jumps perfectly, you can maintain your velocity in-game. In CSGO, combining these 2 mechanics can lead to some absolutely insane frags. But on TF2, it's a lot less noticeable if you pull it off. The one context it's actually useful in is if you're market guarding a soldier, as if you rocket jump and pull off a perfect b-hop as you land, you can trick the game into thinking you're still airborne and therefore hit enemies with a crit. Outside of this though, it's very niche in its application. Yet for whatever reason, spy mains really like to b-hop everywhere they go, even if it's serving them next to 0 utility, and is even potentially slowing them down on their rollouts in the long term. It just gives your ADHD brain something to do whilst you're going back to the front line, and very occasionally, it can lead to a cool clip. But either way, I was doing it more, meaning the brain rot was slowly infecting my entire body. The second way I noticed the spy brain rot was that, how do I put this without antagonizing myself too much? Let's just say I was starting to get more frustrated with the game. You saw a glimpse of this in the previous section on day 16 where I rage quit after one too many spy checks, but this was going to become a much more common recurrence as the challenge progressed. If my team was looking hopeless or the enemy team just had a composition that I was not going to penetrate, sometimes I just cut my losses and re-queued to avoid the pain of dying on repeat to 3 pyros permanently spy checking the engineer's nest. Now, don't worry too much, this is only stage 1 early onset spy brain rot, meaning we still have some time on our hands, but let's just say later on in the challenge as my condition worsened, I may or may not have broken my fan from hitting it too hard after dying one too many times on day 92 of the challenge, but hey, that's just some fun that we can look forward to later in the video, right? So anyway, why do I bring up the spy brain rot? Well, as we enter the next 10 day segment of this challenge, it means I need to swap around my weapons, and unfortunately, it was time for me to indulge in the quintessential sweaty spy main loadout for this portion of the challenge, and oh god, here we go. Since our revolver hit 1,000 kills, it was time to try out another option, and I decided to go with Camus' favorite gun, the Lestrange. If we take a look at its stats, we can see it increases our cloak duration by 40% overall, which is kinda bonkers to be honest, and every time we hit an enemy with it, we're also rewarded with 15% of our cloak back. These benefits do come at the cost of a 20% damage penalty, which, whilst not ideal, is still a really good trade-off if you ask me. Prior to starting the challenge, the Lestrange has always been my go-to pick on spy, because the additional cloak it provides you with just gives you so much more flexibility and wiggle room to work with when you're in the enemy team's backline. You find yourself stressing less about having to decloak in an unfavorable position, or desperately scrambling to find an ammo pack with this thing equipped, and oh boy, does that relieve you of some of the unnecessary stress and pressure that comes along with playing this horrible class. It also synergizes really well with the Kunai, as it's the only revolver in the game that provides you with a passive buff when it isn't equipped. As you remember from the previous section, taking 1v1s with the revolver isn't desirable because 1, you're more likely to lose duels on 70 HP against basically any opponent, and 2, if you have overheal from a backstab, it's a better idea to go for another stab rather than pulling out your gun so you can keep the chain going. The Kunai wants you to stab as much as possible, so an option like the Lestrange, which gives us a flat buff to our cloak without us even ever having to swap to it, makes it a super desirable choice. I'll talk about it more later on in the video, but options like the Ambassador and Diamondback are solid picks with the utility they provide, but their benefits only come into play once they're actually equipped and active in battle, which is why I love the Lestrange's passive upsides so damn much. I'll talk more about how useful this thing is shortly, but for now, I want to introduce you to the other new addition to our loadout. But unlike the Lestrange, which doesn't have many dedicated hate campaigns towards it, this next weapon is slightly more controversial. So say goodbye to the Invis Watch and hello to the Dead Ringer. Yeah, shut up, I hear you, okay. Look, even if you try to burn me at the stake for my crimes against humanity by choosing this unlock, it doesn't matter, because guess what? I'll just feign my death the second a flame particle hits me and run away before you even realize. Now, I don't want to unpack every nuance there is to the Dead Ringer just yet, so for now, I'll give you the basic rundown. Unlike the other watches which allow you to go invisible on command, the Dead Ringer is reliant on us first taking damage. Once you right click, you'll see that the Dead Ringer pops up in your left hand, and if we get hit by a bullet, explosion, fire particle, melee swing, or even if we take full damage, we will be turned invisible and a fake corpse of ours will hit the ground to fool the enemy team, but I'm putting a big asterisk here because it usually won't trick anyone, but more on that later. For these first 3 seconds of our cloak, we are given some pretty major buffs, such as a speed boost, meaning we can move around faster, afterburn immunity, which is a godsend for escaping pyros, a 65% damage resistance, and we won't reveal ourselves if we bump into enemies. This does come at the cost of losing half of our cloak bar immediately, and the remaining 50% charge depletes over the 7 seconds of invisibility we have. Because the Dead Ringer can't cloak on command, it does mean we'll need 100% of our charge before we're able to use it again, and this is made even more painful because we're actually unable to pick up ammo packs or use dispensers to speed up this process. The other important change to the Dead Ringer is its comically loud decloak sound. With the Invis Watch, you can usually get away with decloaking near an enemy as long as the battlefield is roaring with gunfire, but the Dead Ringer, if you decloak in a 20km radius of your target, they'll still probably manage to hear you, meaning you often have to travel pretty damn deep into the backline if you don't want to get caught out. Okay, so there's a basic rundown on how our 2 new additions to the loadout work, and I think it's important you have that context going into this next segment of the challenge because I had a very specific goal for these next 10 days. This is the sweaty spy main loadout for a reason, as once you piece these 3 weapons together, you are primed to hit trick stabs. These 10 days were going to be solely dedicated to improving my ability to hit trick stabs, as up until this point, I'd only really been going for them when the situation allowed it. If some clueless pyro with their brain switched off was chasing me up a ramp, then yeah, of course I'm gonna go for a stair stab, but outside of that, I wasn't really pushing myself to experiment with more aggressive trick stabs, which was halting the progress I was making. I really needed to start putting myself into those uncomfortable situations situations where there are multiple enemies around and no clear form of escape, so I could force myself to stay cool under pressure and start connecting some clean trick stabs. And if there was any loadout which would allow for this to happen, it was gonna be this one. I think the first thing that really stood out for me with this new loadout and fresh mindset shift was the Dead Ringer, as transitioning away from the Invis Watch was a super jarring change to my playstyle, and I wasn't really sure how to adapt in the beginning. As you'll know, in the first 20 days of the challenge, I made a pretty concerted effort to improve my pathing whilst invisible. I was sticking to the flanks, was super conscious of my positioning, and finding the most optimal routes to take, but when I swapped to the Dead Ringer, well, a lot of that fell out the window. Because of all the buffs you receive when you activate the Dead Ringer, you can afford to be much more careless with your pathing. As 1, you have 65% damage resistance, which is actually nuts by the way. 2, you have a speed boost, and 3, you don't reveal yourself when you bump into enemies, which makes the process of getting behind a whole lot easier. At first I was under the impression that the Dead Ringer was going to be a fantastic choice for fooling my enemies. You know, they'll attack you, you'll fake your death, meaning they'll let their guard down because they think you're dead, just for you to emerge moments later from the shadows, inserting your blade at their spine without them ever suspecting a thing. But in practice, this isn't how it went at all. Like sure, if you want to try and fool enemies this way, be my guest. If you want to use a believable disguise, take a bit of damage first, start backpedaling as if you're retreating, and then activate your Dead Ringer, it'll probably look like a believable death. But honestly, why bother? If you're successful with this even once and you manage to get a stab on an opponent you deceived, well, there goes your surprise factor. From that point onwards, anytime they allegedly get a kill on you, they won't drop their guard because they know you have the Dead Ringer equipped, making it a lot harder to pull off successive stabs. From my experience very early on, I found your best bet is to get invisible as quick as possible and by any means necessary, which usually means marching to the front line with your Dead Ringer out, copping a stray minigun bullet from the other side of the map for the least believable death ever, and quickly repositioning yourself with all those powerful buffs you get. It just isn't worth all the setup of making your death look convincing to the enemy team when it's way more valuable to get yourself behind as fast as possible when you can start to actually do some work. It is a little sad that this carelessly hyper-aggressive style of play is so popular with the Dead Ringer, but because it's been in the game for almost 14 years, it's just really hard to genuinely deceive your opponents nowadays, and you're just better off making the most of the speed boost and tankiness it rewards you with, rather than praying to God you're able to fool your enemy with the believable death. And look, I'm not going to sit around and tell you this made it any less enjoyable to use, because God, those buffs you get for the first 3 seconds were so damn fun, especially that speed boost you get. Half the time I found myself decloaking almost instantly with the Dead Ringer just so I could make use of the extra speed you're granted, because it opens up so many doors to you. Take a look at this clip from day 20 on Mountain Lab where I push aggressively through a choke point and get my Dead Ringer activated by this demo. I decloak almost instantly, throw in a couple bunny hops for style points, and loop around to get a drop stab on him that he had no idea was coming. And again, take a look at this clip from day 24 on Swiftwater where I absolutely butcher 2 stabs on the sniper, so I run away, activate my Dead Ringer, decloak pretty quickly, and use the speed to loop back around to stab the medic. You can even see that they're in the process of chasing me when I'm already behind them, which just goes to show the value that extra speed offers when repositioning. There's also a ton of extra stuff the speed boost allows you to do, like access areas of the map you otherwise wouldn't, retreat from the front line quickly, chase down an enemy far away from you, and you can even get some pretty insane trick stabs. Whilst I can't say I hit that many crazy clips this early on in the challenge, as I was 1, still learning the Dead Ringer, and 2, was also still learning how to trick stab, there were a few moments where I did impress myself, but we'll tackle that later on. Before we move on from the Dead Ringer for now, there is one semi-regular occurrence I notice when I use this unlock, and I'll just show you a clip and see if you catch on. Yeah, for some reason, I found that people had the audacity to taunt after killing a Dead Ringer spy. Look, if they don't know I'm using it at first, then it's fair game. We all make mistakes. But so often, I would find myself faking the most unbelievable deaths, and some absolute nimwit would actually fall for it, think they are some absolute genius for killing me, taunt on my fake corpse, just for me to reappear behind them and promptly shit on them. One of my absolute favorites happened here on Badwater, where I hit this nice drop stab on a pyro, taking me all the way up to 210 HP. I turn around, and this other enemy pyro saw me hit that stab. He knows I'm overhealed, so he fires off a flare. I use the Dead Ringer, start to loop back around, and oh, bro, really? You think a single flare just killed the 200 HP spy? Well, bad news bears, I'm still alive. And to top things off, he types in chat, oh shit, the Dead Ring, then leaves the game. Look, if you know an enemy spy is using the Dead Ringer, put your ego to the side and refrain from laughing at them when you kill them, because there is nothing more humiliating than being stuck in a taunt and hearing that painfully loud decloak sound and knowing what's inevitably coming for you. But alright, I've hyped up this block of the challenge as the trick stabbing arc, so I think it's time we take an in-depth look at them, and specifically stair stabs. If you ask me, I'd say it's easily the most iconic type of trick stab in TF2, as the idea of launching yourself over your opponent's head to stab their back is, look, you gotta admit, it's kind of badass. Now, I know I mentioned this briefly, but I want to get this out the way quickly. When I say stair stab, I basically mean any stab where you're on a point of elevation and are able to jump onto or over your opponent's head to get a stab. I can already feel the swarm of virgins from the Spy Mains Discord breathing down my neck saying, actually that's a jump stab because there's no staircase involved in situations like that, but I don't care. It could be a ramp, it could be a little box, it could be a rock, whatever. If it is a point of elevation and I jump over the head of my enemy to stab them, I'm calling it a stair stab. I will die on this hill, I do not care. Be gone, stupid spy mates. You can go to something like TR Walkway and practice on bots to get the fundamental movements of a stair stab down, but in my opinion, it's a lot better to get experience with human players who aren't as easy to predict as a bot walking in a straight line. Now, in the first 20 days of this challenge, I was hitting some pretty decent stair stabs, but the problem I found was that I was often overshooting my jump and landing too far behind them to hit a stab, or I was undershooting my jump and landing in front of them, which, yeah, isn't very conducive to hitting a back stab. Take a look at this clip from all the way back on day 2. We're on pier, and I notice this scout is shooting at me as I'm walking away. So I have the genius idea of baiting him into a stair stab over here. So I walk up, jump back, and ooh, that truly was not even close. I do appreciate that I had the balls to even try this, but yeah, no. We'll take a look at this clip from day 3 on Barnblitz, where I see a demo approaching and decide to go for a stair stab, which, oh my god, it actually hits. So I think, fuck it, let's carry this momentum into another one on the medic, and I have no idea where that jump was trying to go. So I run away like a coward. But hey, that was all in the past, because I was actually starting to impress myself with how consistently I was starting to hit stair stabs. Take a look at this clip from day 28 on my absolute least favorite map, Gold Rush, where a pyro is chasing me behind. I get up these stairs, wait a moment, and predictively jump to hit a stair stab that they honestly never saw coming. We'll take a look here on day 23 where we're on Barnblitz, and I managed to hit not just one stair stab, not just 2 stair stabs, but 3 stair stabs in a row, which is something I could have only dreamed of attempting just 3 weeks earlier in the challenge. I was even starting to wrap my head around more unpredictable types of stair stabs, where I'd find a slight high ground on a prop and use that instead of the more obvious staircases and ramps. You can see this on day 24 where we're on Badwater, and I approach a large group of enemies huddled around a dispenser. I get a little bit overwhelmed, so I sap the sentry, then get on top of the railing to hit a super clean stair stab on this soldier. And on the same day on Swiftwater, I make my way onto this high ground where there are 2 soldiers, so I jump on the railing, get over his head, and hit a stab as I fall back down onto the low ground, and yeah, this one felt like it was from a movie trailer or some shit. I can't lie. It wasn't all perfect though, as I would still occasionally go for stair stabs that look like they should be stair stabs, like the blood is literally on their back, but for whatever reason, it wouldn't register. I think this came down to the timing of when I'd crouch as I jumped, or maybe it's just source code spaghetti hitboxes not registering, but either way, I was still slipping up here and there. Overall though, my stair stabs got really good during this 10-day block of the challenge, and my new choice of loadout was definitely helping me out in this regard too. So look, things were on a pretty good roll for these 10 days. The new loadout was different, but I was slowly improving with it, my stair stabs were getting better, and I was starting to get more and more clip-worthy moments. But there was a little problem simmering under the surface. I've done my best to hide it so far, but it was getting a little ridiculous at this point. You see, in previous videos, you guys know that I like to play on Uncletopia. I think the rules Uncle Dane has implemented on his servers are great for a more fair and more competitive TF2 experience. I know that isn't for everyone, but for me, it definitely is. But because there is generally a higher skill level on the Uncletopia servers, and I was going to be playing Spy, I just didn't really want to have competent gamers constantly checking for me and absolutely shutting me down at any given moment, so for the entirety of the challenge so far, I had been on Valve's official casual matchmaking. Now, this is fantastic because players don't tend to be as good, meaning I could limit test a bit harder, you know, experiment with my trick stabs more, try different angles to push from, discover more aggressive routes, anything of that nature. Now, this is all good and well, but unfortunately for me, if I'm playing on Valve's official servers, that means I have to adhere to Valve's official mechanics. And you probably know where I'm going with this if you have any experience in TF2, but oh my fucking god, random crits were absolutely pummeling me. I actually have not died to so many random crits as I have in the last hour. Now don't worry, I'm not just going to sit here and whine you about random crits being unfair in a general sense, because 1, we all know they're complete bullshit, and 2, much smarter people have already talked about it, but what I did realize as random crits continue to ruin my life through the challenge was that they actually disproportionately affect spy players more so than any other class in the game. Let me explain. In TF2, you have a 2% chance to get a random critical hit, which triples your damage output in an instant. However, the more damage you do, the higher this this chance gets. So if you've dealt 0 damage in the last 20 seconds, you have a 2% chance to random crit. But at 200 damage, this becomes 4.5%, at 400 damage, this is 7%, and this caps all the way up at 800 damage, where you will have a 12% chance to randomly crit. This alone is an absolute joke of a mechanic if you ask me, but it gets even worse when we look at melee weapons. The base chance to randomly crit when you have your melee out is 15%, and if you've done 800 damage in the last 20 seconds, this goes all the way up to a 60% chance. So you might already know these numbers and be thinking, well, we all know it's bullshit, elmaxo, so what in particular is so crazy about this? Well, if I haven't made it obvious enough so far in this video, Spy has to stab people, meaning he is constantly within melee range of his opponents. And guess what? Classes like Medic, Engineer, Demo, and Sniper have a tendency to immediately swap to their melee weapons if they ever catch a Spy in close quarter combat. Meaning,
life is pain! I hate myself!
you are going to be on the receiving end of so many bullshit moments as Spy purely because of the absurdly high chance melee weapons have to random crit. I can't even begin to explain to you how many times I was trying to pull off a cool trick stab just for some cocky medic to put me to sleep with a 195 damage swing from his uber sword. The worst part about this is that it disproportionately affects Spy, as other than Demo Knight, he's the only class in the game who is consistently fighting opponents within melee range, meaning you are going to get randomly critted over and over, unlike anyone else in the game. And you want to know the worst part about it? Spy can't randomly crit with his knife, so he doesn't even get to benefit from this stupid ass mechanic either. You might be saying to yourself, elmaxo, you can one-shot anybody in the game with your backstab, so you really need random crits, you noob? But that takes skill! It's hard to trick stab a competent opponent because they are expecting it, whereas a random crit, as the name kind of suggests, it comes out of nowhere and annihilates all of your hopes and aspirations in one unpredictable quick smack. Oh my god, he gets a random crit again. There are even moments where Kunai overheal wasn't enough to prevent a random crit, like here on day 29 where I'm on Harvest. I get a quick stab on the sniper, giving me a nice overheal, then the enemy reacts and oh! Lovely! This sniper executes me instantly. I mean, god, look at his strange weapon, where 507 out of the 664 kills are critical hits. I know that counts Girardi, but Jesus man, that's 3/4 of the kills. That just isn't right, okay? To give you some perspective on how pervasive random crits were over the challenge, by the end of things, I had over 13 minutes of footage dedicated exclusively to random crits doing me dirty. Look, all I'm saying is if Marcus Aurelius were alive in the 21st century and had to deal with random crits being in TF2, to be honest, I don't know if we'd have stoicism, because trying to keep your cool when you continually die to a mechanic that's completely out of your control is the opposite of fun. Some people might even go as far to call it, bad. Anyway, I won't subject you to the whole 13 minutes of crying, so here's a comically short hypercut of it all. There's like another 100 clips, but I figure we don't need any more hypercuts, do we? I think that's enough, so let's just move on. But you look at that. I think it's good I got that out of my system. So I think I'm ready to wrap up this section of the challenge now. By the end of this 10-day block, I had accumulated 1,969 kills and died 1,064 times, meaning I had a KD of 1.85, which is an increase of 0.13 or 75%. My spy time also increased from 116 hours and 17 minutes to 135 hours and 9 minutes for a total of just under 19 hours in this portion of the challenge. Things were well and truly underway at this point, and I could feel myself getting better day by day when it came to the fundamentals. Unsurprisingly, when you play a class for 3 hours every day for almost a month, you're going to start to see some progress. I think the highlight of this 10-day block definitely came on day 22, where I managed to get 170 points on one half of Thunder Mountain, meaning if the game went to completion, I could have potentially closed things off with a staggering 340 points in just one game. The only issue at this point in the challenge was that I was more and more realizing that to reach my goal of 280 hours by the end of 100 days, I needed 2 hours of in-game spy time every day, but I was slowly realizing that this translated to close to 3 hours of TF2 every day, which is more than I anticipated going into it. Currently, I was playing just over 2 hours a day, and this meant I was about 5 hours behind schedule at this point in the challenge, which was going to mean I needed to play even more as I progressed. Overall though, things were still traveling really well. I was having a good time, I was progressing nicely, and I was looking forward to all the new weapons I was going to be trying out. And speaking of, we were actually going to see a couple of new faces featured in this next part of the challenge, and it was going to be some of the most fun I'd have. For the past 20 days of the challenge, I had been using the Kunai, and it had racked up a pretty impressive 3,015 kills, but As you'll remember, one of the criteria for this challenge is that we needed to get 1,000 kills on each weapon, meaning it was time to introduce a fresh face to the roster, and this guy would turn out to be some of the most fun I'd have for the entire 100 days. Ladies and gentlemen, meet the Big Earner. If I had to boil down the two most popular choices when it came to Spy's knives, it would be the Kunai and this big fella right here, as they both provide you with some insanely powerful buffs when you hit a successful backstab. As I've talked at length so far, the Kunai gives you that cushy safety net of a massive overheal when you get a backstab, but the Big Earner, well, just take a look at this clip and see if you notice anything. Oh, wow. Honestly, I think my reaction to what just happened summarized things pretty nicely. Because holy shit, did you see the speeds I was traveling at during that 4-man chain stab? If that clip didn't make it obvious enough, the major upside there is to using the Big Earner is the speed boost it grants on kills, which is useful for a myriad of reasons. But before we dive into that, let's actually take a look at the drawback of this knife, and that is its health penalty. Although this downside isn't as intense as the Kunai's, we drop from 125 HP down to 100 if we select the Big Earner. And if you've played TF2 for an extended amount of time, you'll know that is a pretty problematic health threshold to be at, because we can now be one-shot by... oh god. The Scattergun, Force of Nature, Soda Popper, Baby's Face Blaster, Backscatter, Rocket Launcher, Direct Hit, Black Box, Cow Mangler, Beggar's Bazooka, Reserve Shooter, Equalizer, Grenade Launcher, Lock and Load, Iron Bomber, Huntsman, Fortified Compound, Ambassador, and Diamondback. On top of everything that could one-shot us before. It's such an irritating health level to be at, but because I was going to be using the Dead Ringer with it, I was hoping that the extra form of defensive utility that provides could reduce the amount we'd be suffering with this lower health pool. It's also important to note that along with a speed boost, the Big Earner also rewards us with 30% of our cloak back on a kill, and as you remember, we can't actually use ammo packs or dispensers to regen our Dead Ringer faster, meaning these two weapons were going to synergize really nicely together moving into the next 10 days. And look, yeah, I'm going to cut straight to the chase here. I fell in love with this knife basically instantly. If there's one thing Funk has deeply ingrained into my psyche over the years, is that the combination of 1, moving at high speeds, and 2, shooting enemy gamers, is like the coolest shit ever. So when you give me a knife that lets me zoom around the map to change stab after stab after stab, yeah, I'm probably gonna have a good time. By far, what I found to be the most useful aspect to the Big Earner is its ability to gap close, which led to these absolutely filthy chain stabs during the challenge. This is one of those things I can't explain to you with words as much as I can show you clip after clip after clip, where I'd simply get one unsuspecting stab on an enemy and then turn it into a speedy spree of absolute mayhem. Take a look at this clip from day 34 on Barmblitz, where I get one quick stab on this soldier, zoom up the stairs to get another soldier, drop down amidst the spy, but then stab this demo, then zoom on over to the choke and get a third soldier before topping it all up with a speed boosted strafe stab on this medic. We'll take a look here on day 33 on Upward, where I get a stab on this first pyro, use the speed to go over and stab the second pyro before zooming across the gap and backstabbing a third pyro. I don't even know if the speed boost was absolutely necessary to get all 3 pyros there, but I can safely say it made it feel like 10 times cooler to pull off, and that's what had me so enticed about the Big Earner so quickly after picking it up. I will admit that I thought the best use for the Big Earner going into this block of the challenge was going to be when it came to trick stabbing, as having a faster movement speed allows you to strafe behind enemies more easily or start stair stabs from even further away, but to be honest, it was a rarity that I'd ever pull anything that impressive off. There was a pretty cool moment on day 30 on Nucleus where I stab a sniper, move on to the pyro, and whilst I have the speed boost, do a little ring around the Rosie on this column to confuse the soldier, and ultimately strafe stab past it. Or here on Snowy Coast on day 37, I get a butter knife kill on the scout, which surprisingly still gives you the speed boost, so I use it to make this jump over onto the heavy, where I get a clean little stair stab. Outside of limited examples like those 2 clips though, I gotta be honest, I wasn't able to hit that many speedy trick stabs at all. I had this interesting moment on Kong King where I get the speed boost off this spy and then start doing circles around this heavy, choking the backstab twice before eventually succeeding and then piecing together an absolutely horrific stair stab attempt. I don't even know if you can really call that first one a trick stab. It just felt like the heavy was more confused tracking me with his minigun than I was running circles around him, and that's generally how speed boosted trick stabs went for me in this stage of the challenge, a confusing fury of movement, usually leading to nothing spectacular. I guess it made sense that there would be a slight adjustment period as my timings for trick stabs would be quite different if I'm moving even faster relative to my enemy, but still, I was kind of disappointed I didn't get many clip-worthy speed boosted trick stabs in this 10-day block. Don't get me wrong though, there were a whole heap of normal trick stabs I hit without a speed boost. I mean shit, I was starting to get the occasional understab on a rocket jumping soldier at this point. And the consistency of my stair stabs was really starting to impress me at this point, but alas, none of them were hit with a cool little speed boost. But hey, that's alright, because the Big Earner's speed boost can be used for a whole lot of things, and it was actually during this block of the challenge that I began began to realize what one of those things were, as I was making use of a very particular strategy as spy, and it's something I coined the loop playstyle. Take a look at this clip all the way back from day 2 of the challenge where I'm on high pass, and we can actually see a very early prototype of the loop playstyle here. I come from the health pack up to the point to get an easy stab and sap on this engineer before quickly going invis and heading straight back down to where I came from and securing a stab on this sniper. Admittedly, it's not the best example, but it shows the early thought process of me realizing, hold on, you can retread the ground you've come from to repeatedly get kills. Now fast forward to day 7 where we're on Borneo, and I drop down from this high ground to stab the heavy, then cloak away up the staircase just to get back to my initial position and repeat the exact same maneuver, only this time on the enemy medic. I don't know why this clicked in my head so early on, but I began realizing that a really easy way to rack up kills as spy was looping the same path over and over. I don't actually know why this works. If anything, I thought people would see or hear their teammates die nearby and be extra cautious approaching the area, but no, I could just do the same loops over and over to an alarming degree of success. Take a look at this clip from day 39 on Dust Bowl, where I'm defending and Deadringer back behind them, stab this obvious spy, then speed my way up the stairs to get another kill on this demo. You might think, oh, after such a successful play, it's now time to retreat and recoup for a second, but because I see my Deadringer is charged up again, I say, nah, fuck it, and repeat the exact same path to get another double kill on their medic and heavy before actually retreating to safety. And take a look at this clip, which I must admit is from later on in the challenge on like day 70, but oh my god, is it good. I'm on pier, flanking behind, where I hit a quick 1-2 on this demo man and soldier before, you guessed it, going straight back to the route I came from just to hit a stab on a med, a stab on this demo, and oh my god, a clean ass stair stab on this demo knight. I seriously don't understand why this works, and maybe my pattern recognition brain was just lumping together a bunch of lucky coincidences and assumed it must be a good strategy, but I swear, it actually has some validity to it. Now the reason I decided to bring up this whole loop playstyle thing in this section specifically is because, wow, do the Big Earner and Deadringer synergize so well with it. Both of these options provide us with additional speed, which makes closing the distance and actually completing the loop to get back to our enemies so much faster. If we rewind and take a look at this clip on pier again, you'll see that I hit the 2 stabs and run away with a speed boost before activating my Deadringer, which gives me yet another speed boost, which I utilize to chase down this medic faster, and god, does it just make the full loop so damn fun to successfully pull off. Although spots like this where you can loop around exist on basically every map, some of my absolute favorites had to be on Harvest in the indoor section where you can just keep jumping off the roof at their spawn and going up the staircase to repeat, as well as on Frontier First where you can use this building and its staircase to farm clueless gamers. Again, I don't even really understand why this looping strategy works so well for me, but given any opportunity to attempt it, you just know I would, because it felt like some kind of black magic cheat code for stacking up huge kill streaks. And on the topic of big kill streaks, I gotta admit something to you guys. You know that so far in this video, I've liked to switch up my loadout in each block of the challenge so I can get closer and closer to 1,000 kills on each of Spy's weapons. Well, I actually made another change to my loadout with the Big Earner on day 30. You see, I thought having both the Lestrange and Big Earner at the same time would be slightly overkill when it comes to getting your cloak back, as they both fulfill a pretty similar purpose. So I took a look at some of the other options we had available in the revolver slot that we hadn't tried yet, and there was the Ambassador, which I actually plan to use in the next 10-day block, there was the Enforcer, which I was doing everything in my power to avoid for the time being, and finally there was, the Diamondback. I know I've made a point already that the Kunai and the Deadringer are pretty hated, but this guy feels straight up dirty to use, which is why I've tried to keep it under wraps for as long as possible in this section of the video, but I think it's finally time for me to come clean with the truth. For those who don't know, the Diamondback is that one revolver from Deus Ex Human Revolution, which also happens to sit on Elon Musk's bedside table for whatever reason, and it packs quite the punch. We are forfeiting 15% of our base damage and the ability to randomly crit so that we can store a critical hit for every building we sap or every backstab we get. This gives us the ability to launch off 102 damage shots to anyone on the map, as crits ignore fall off, giving us some seriously crazy damage potential. Before I started using it for the challenge, I decided to place the critical kill strange part on it, so at the end of 100 days we could see what the ratio of non-crit to crit kills would be, and spoiler alert, it was about 50% of them, and double spoiler alert, holy shit, after using this weapon for like a few days, I quickly realized just how absolutely disgusting this crit mechanic is. The most common critique you'll find about the Diamondback is that it rewards you too generously for playing Spy, just how you're supposed to. You know, the whole point of your class is to backstab people and sap the enemy engine's buildings, so buffing Spy for doing those two things seems kinda unbalanced, and yeah, look, it almost definitely is. Take a look at this clip from day 30 on Powerhouse, where I had previously hit 2 stabs and sapped a couple of buildings, meaning I had 4 crits loaded in my Diamondback. So I decided to come up to the window for a vantage point, and oh my god, I just executed that engineer in 2 shots and look how far away he was. I also get another kill on this demo down below me too, but Jesus, personally, I don't think the guy who can one-shot any enemy in the game from close range should also be able to do, well, whatever the hell that was to that engineer. And again, take a look at this clip from day 38 on Kong King, where I walk around a corner to see a spy get a backstab, and he then proceeds to laugh at his victim's icy corpse, which is very alpha by the way. So I pick myself up a free stab on him, giving me a critical hit for my Diamondback, meaning I'm able to whip around 180 degrees on this unsuspecting sniper and one-shot him. Now, let me ask you a simple question about what just happened. Did this poor sniper called Combusting Skull truly deserve his fate? Was there really anything he could do to prevent me from killing him? Is it his fault his egomaniac of a teammate felt the need to laugh at his victim's corpse, allowing me to get a free stab, which all but guaranteed his death? Well, if you ask me, the answer is pretty clear. No, and definitely no, because god, this mechanic sucks ass to play against, because it's so damn unfair. Why do you have to bear the burden of your teammates feeding some 10k hour spy main free backstab kills just for him to run around the map out-sniping your team's snipers? And yes, what I realized very quickly whilst using the Diamondback for this challenge is that I think its effective range and the fact you can launch little nukes across the map at enemy gamers is one of its biggest issues when it comes to balance. As I mentioned before, critical hits aren't affected by damage fall. If you fire a rocket and hit someone across the map, it's doing something like 30 to 40 damage due to this mechanic. But if you slap some crits on that bad boy, then ooh, you've been granted the ability to murder 8 out of the 9 classes in an instant without needing to be all that precise. I often would just find myself scanning the enemy team's front line looking for some poor light class who was unfortunate enough to take 30 damage from a sticky bomb explosion and proceed to cross-map tomahawk them like I'm in Call of Duty with a juicy 102 damage crit. I hate the idea that a class like Spy, who has the ability to instantly end the life of anybody in the game with a backstab at close range, can also have the ability to instantly end the life of somebody from longer ranges, and you might be thinking to yourself, isn't that what Spy's other revolver, the Ambassador, can do too? And whilst I will be talking about it in depth in the next section, I will say here that 1, the Ambassador got absolutely gutted in Jungle Inferno and had damage fall off applied to its headshot damage, and 2, it actually takes skill to hit a headshot. Being rewarded for stuff as basic as backstabbing and sapping, which are your 2 primary functions as Spy, just feels like way too low of a threshold to be able to instantly execute classes so far away from you. This is the reason that I think the Girardi Bushwhacker on Snipe is so broken as well, because we have this long-range assassin who can drop 5 out of the 9 classes in 0.2 of a second from anywhere on the map, who can also turn around to a spy at point blank, throw a jar of piss on them, and proceed to shut them down with a 195 damage crit. That just ain't right. And look, don't get me wrong, dealing 102 damage at long ranges is absolutely criminal, but that shouldn't overshadow how also broken the Diamondback is in normal close range duels. Take a look here on day 34 where we're on Badwater, and I get 2 quick stabs on a heavy and scout who are pushing the cart, which brings me to 3 crits in total. So I turn around and pop this medic so hard that the damage sends him surfing up the ramp, then I kill him, and I also kill a sniper who tries to push. And yeah, a 100 HP sneaky Frenchman just single-handedly denied an entire last push on his own because of this stupid thing right here. God, look, I could keep ranting about how dirty I felt using the Diamondback for this challenge, but in an attempt to curb that, let's talk about its downsides for a moment. Firstly, you can store a bunch of crits while you're alive and then die randomly, meaning you lose all that potential damage, which kinda sucks. Secondly, you have to actually hit the crit shots, I guess. That's not really like a downside, it's just what you do in a first-person shooter. And thirdly, you lose the passive cloak buff you get from something like the Latranche. Yeah, there's also a slight damage penalty, but I think there was a total of 3 moments whilst using the Diamondback where it meant I lost a duel, whereas there was like a collective 50 clips of me wanting to hop straight into a warm bath for how dirty I felt after nuking some poor soul from across the map. Overall, a bad weapon for bad people. It probably needs a nerf, I don't really know. It's obscenely strong and it was doing a whole lot of work whilst I used it for the challenge, but I couldn't shake the feeling of how damn unfair it felt to use. But okay, now that I've revealed the truth about secretly using the Diamondback, I think it's time we move on to greener pastures. And when I say greener pastures, I mean that up until this point in the video, I've kinda overlooked one of Spy's most foundational mechanics, and that is disguises. One thing I promised myself I'd do at the start of this challenge was to watch some guys on YouTube to obtain the wisdom of much better Spy plays, so I could prevent all the pain of screwing up over and over without even realizing. You know what they say, right? A smart person learns from his mistakes, but a truly wise person learns from the mistakes of others, Quote Mr. Paladin or something. Now, did I actually adhere to that promise? No. And that was pretty stupid. I mean, I knew the importance of disguising early on, and I don't think I did a particularly bad job at it, but I definitely started to learn just how powerful good disguise choices could be as the challenge progressed, especially when you make the most of the environment around you. Take a look at this clip from all the way back on day 2 of the challenge where we're on Swiftwater, and I, for some reason, think I am an absolutely Oscar-worthy actor. I pick a sniper disguise because I'm like looking through the sightline like I'm a sniper on the enemy team, and I'm strafing all around, and then I awkwardly look to get a stab, but then turn around, back to sniping, then everything gets real messy, and we get a kill, but I'm not particularly proud of it. You know, I can appreciate the thought here with my acting, but oh boy, was the execution lacking substantially in these early days. Things did start to look better over time though, as you can see here on day 13, where I do a much more convincing job with the sniper disguise. I'm positioned better, I don't make eye contact with any of the enemies, I even commit to the disguise after I go in too early, and ultimately, my patience is rewarded with a quick little double stab. This clip highlights something about disguising that I began to learn very quickly in this challenge, and that's how important not looking at your enemies is, because it is unbelievably... Oh god, do I really have to use this word? Okay, whatever. It is unbelievably suspicious if you decide to make eye contact with your enemies. There aren't that many valid reasons for your teammate to be staring you intensely in the eyes unless they 1. Feel a certain type of way towards you, or 2. Happen to be a conniving Frenchman on the opposing team, and it's probably the most obvious tell that newer spies give away when they're about to go in for a stab. Now if you're super aware of your surroundings and know that there's nobody around to see you, then sure. You can glue your eyes to your target's back as you approach them to make sure you don't mess up the stab, but that isn't a privilege you're always going to have. One of the skills you have to learn to master as spy is using your peripheral vision and other environmental factors to know where your opponent is without directly looking at them. You can see this on this clip from day 27 on Borneo, where I'm in a great position to get a stab on this soldier. However, because I don't know if there is a group of enemies coming from behind who would notice my suspicious behavior instantly, I make sure not to stare directly at him and instead look forward towards the cart like one of his teammates would, and that way I can safely get the stab. This was actually funny because as I quickly turn around at the end of the clip here, you'll notice that there were 2 enemies right behind me who would have 100% known I was a spy if I decided to have a staring contest with the soldier's back hitbox as I approached it, meaning I almost certainly would have been caught out. Another great way to trick enemies with your disguises that I learned relatively quickly was using this key right here. You see it? It's the S key, and if you press it in game, you walk backwards. I know, truly revolutionary stuff, but seriously, this key has been blessed with eldritch powers because it is perhaps the most consistent way of fooling literally any enemy ever that you're on their team. Don't believe me? Well, have a look for yourself. I'm on Badwater, I'm disguised as a spy, I hold the S key as if I'm retreating from the front line, and yep, this soldier buys the act entirely, so I clean him up. Here on Powerhouse, I glance back quickly and see enemies are coming, so again, I hold that S key and backpedal straight into the scout for another free stab. And finally, here on Dust Bowl, I turn my back as I approach the choke, holding my S key, fooling everyone as I backpedal and leading to a quick double stab on this pyro and heavy. You do need to have good map awareness to pull this off, because if you end up backpedaling straight into an enemy and awkwardly bump into them, you're gonna get caught out instantly. But if you time it well and know what situations to use it in, backpedaling will convince your opponents that, this guy must be retreating from the front line, and oh look, he can't be a spy because he's not looking at us and he trusts us as his loving teammates that will take care of him. But no, unfortunately for them, you're just a big brain spy player who knows how to manipulate the trust of others like any good human being should. This all might seem super pedantic, but when you're going up against more competent players, I really can't overstate how important I found small tricks like avoiding eye contact and backpedaling to be when you're trying to blend into your environment. Any subtle movement or stare in the wrong direction can absolutely blow your cover, and that's the last thing you want if you have a knife like the Kunai or Big Earner equipped, which lowers your base health pool already. I will admit that later on in the challenge, I kind of stopped putting in the effort with making a convincing disguise because I found myself leaning really heavily on the Dead Ringer's inbuilt resistances, which don't require you to pick good disguises when you're trying to get behind. But hey, for now, I was still dishing out some Oscar-worthy performances to socially engineer enemy gamers into giving me their back hitboxes. But alright, I think it's time we take a recap for this 10-day block of the challenge. My strange beard hit the highest rank at 15,000 points on day 34, my Big Earner reached 1,000 kills on day 37, meaning we could tick another weapon off the list, and I even snuck in a 23 kill streak on this great game I had on Badwater on day 39, which was very nice. I accumulated a total of 1,853 kills and died 827 times, leading to a really impressive KD of 2.24, which was a significant improvement, and I think that's because I was really starting to wrap my head around using the Dead Ringer, and also the Diamondback was just filthy and definitely getting me some extra undeserved kills. My spy time increased from 135 hours and 9 49 minutes to 150 hours and 34 minutes for a total of 15.5 hours, but this actually meant I was well behind schedule. I was actually supposed to be at 160 hours at this point of the challenge, and I was more and more realizing that 2 hours of spy time on my stats page was definitely not equivalent to 2 hours of time in TF2 itself, meaning I was going to have to start playing more each day, which is going to be fantastic for my mental health. Yeah, I'm just sure of it. But look, my KD was crazy, I was actually starting to get really good at spy at this point, and I was still feeling great about the challenge in general. I mean, I was getting slightly frustrated at the occasional bullshit moment, but it wasn't anything too bad. Unfortunately for me though, our streak of good times was going to come to an end, because for the first time in this entire challenge so far, I actually started to dread logging onto TF2 every day, and that's thanks to a new loadout we were going to be using. Can I keep it real with you? I was really looking forward to this 10-day block of the challenge because this was gonna be gun spy time. I was gonna get out my ambassador, I was gonna hit some clean-ass headshots, and absolutely dominate every server I touched. Look, you can even see here all the way back on day 12 of the challenge that I'm excited to start using the ambassador I got because it's got such nice parts on it.
Did you get a Aussie?
Yeah, it got headshot kills, damage dealt, and players hit, and it's villainous violent. No! And I mean, look at this thing. It's Australian, it's pro kill streak, it's got headshot kills and damage dealt. It's beautiful. Truly a work of art. I was so unbelievably excited to shake things up for a little bit by only using my ambassador, and wow, it was easily the biggest letdown of the entire challenge. But God, I think I'm getting a little too far ahead of myself here. As you've seen throughout this challenge so far, there are many ways of playing spy. We've seen how your playstyle can switch up depending on which knife you use, like with the Kunai, we're playing a whole lot more aggressive than we are with the stock knife, for example. But we can actually take it even further than that because we have subclasses. If this is your first time watching the elmaxo channel, you might not know too much about Gunspy, but I have always had a massive soft spot for this subclass in my heart. Last year in March, I released a video called Gunspy Unleashed, where I ran around the streets of Sydney dressed up as John to show the world my unwavering dedication to this beautiful class. And really, do you want to know how much this subclass means to me? Well, I mentioned it earlier, but as a quick reminder, John the Gunspy is literally permanently etched onto my shoulder, and if that isn't dedication, then I don't know what is. As Gunspy, we are foregoing the almighty power of the knife and its ability to instant kill in favor of the revolver. This transforms us from a short-range melee assassin into a mid-range power class. Though I will put yet another hefty asterisk next to power here because you're only going to be putting up soldier and demo man type damage numbers if you're capable of landing literally every shot you fire off. It isn't necessarily the strongest subclass out there, and critics call it too gimmicky, but before we judge it so heavily, let's take a look at the loadout involved. Now I will admit that in my video Gunspy Unleashed, I did slander anyone who uses anything other than the stock revolver, but because I had already reached 1,000 kills with it for the challenge, and I had this gorgeous golden masterpiece which was just begging to be used, I decided to run with the ambassador for my Gunspy adventures rather than stock, which may see me branded as a heretic, but you just gotta do what you just gotta do sometimes. I also decided that I was going to keep using the Dead Ringer here because it is such a powerful defensive tool with the resistances and speed it gives, meaning you can get yourself out of a bunch of sticky situations, and because we don't really need to get behind the enemy team as Gunspy, the other Invis watchers just aren't nearly as useful. The final addition to this Gunspy loadout was going to be a new knife, and that was the Spicicle. Because we won't be going for backstabs anywhere near as often, the extra defensive utility this thing provides against Pyro with its fire immunity is just a nice little tool to have in our repertoire if things happen to go pear-shaped. But okay, you know the subclass, you got a brief overview of the loadout, you know what we're going to be doing, so now it's time to actually show you how well things went, and no, as I said, it was all very underwhelming, and that's mostly thanks to the ambassador. If we take a look at its stats, it does 15% less damage, it fires 20% slower, and it can't randomly crit, but that is all a trade-off for the massive upside of being able to headshot your opponents. You remember how the Diamondback could fire off 102 damage shots from across the map just because you got a backstab or sap? Well, the ambassador can do this too. The only difference is that it actually takes an enormous amount of skill to line up your crosshair on an enemy's head at longer distances to secure that big damage reward. Except wait, no, I'm straight up lying to you, because if the ambassador could do 102 damage headshots to enemies across the map from you, even if it did take a lot of skill to hit, it would be broken. And it was broken for so long. This thing used to be public enemy #1 when it came to Spy's weapon balance, so on Jungle Inferno all the way back in October 2017, Valve gave the ambassador fall-off damage, meaning at longer ranges, your headshots would now only inflict 54 damage rather than 102, aka an almost 50% decrease in its power. This was basically every Spy main's 9/11, because the ambassador went from absolutely busted to basically the worst option to choose from. Well, arguably, but we'll get to you later. So, going into this Gunspy block of the challenge, I knew it wasn't going to be crazy powerful, but I thought that because my aim was decent enough, I was going to be able to put out some pretty decent damage with it. But if I had to use one word to summarize my experience for the next 10 days, it would be mid. What I found to be the most jarring aspect of the Ambassador when I started using it was how intense the damage fall off was on headshots. Like, yeah, I agree that 102 damage is a bit too generous to opponents half the map away from you, but even in mid-range combat, I found that headshots were doing a pathetic amount of damage. Take a look at this clip on Hoodoo, where I headshot a heavy 5 times from a mid-range distance, but he's just able to heal through it with the medic because I am firing peanuts at his cranium. Admittedly, my aim was far from perfect here, but 71 damage from this range when it would only take him half a second to gun me down with the Tomislav? I don't know about that. I'll take a look here at this clip on day 43 on Barn Blitz, where I headshot an NG upgrading his telly for 67, and it requires me to follow up with 3 body shots in a row to secure the kill, with the last one doing a measly 18 damage. It became obvious to me within the first few rounds of using this thing that I would be much better off just using the stock revolver for its reliability and consistency, but given it already had 1,000 kills, I knew I was just going to have to make the Ambassador work, and look, it wasn't all bad. Even though I felt like some pesky little mosquito on the sidelines, hitting headshots was still pretty satisfying, and there's definitely worse way to be getting kills in TF2. I think my absolute favorite thing to do with the Ambassador was letting my ego take the wheel, and what I mean by that was, boy, did I fall in love with taking the absolute stupidest 1v1s with enemy snipers to see who could win the precision war. Now, if you're thinking that Spy is at a severe disadvantage in a long-range duel against Sniper, you'd be 100% correct. But that didn't stop me from trying to get some clean ass frags. Take a look here on day 41 on the worst payload map to ever exist, Thunder Mountain, where a sniper spots me in the window, so I decided to take matters into my own hands. I hit 1 clean headshot, 2 clean headshots, and then finish things off with a nice little body shot. And again, because my ego is the one in charge here, you already know my muscle memory was going straight to a laugh taunt to really rub it in. Or again here on Gorge on the same day, I spot a sniper at the choke point, so I hit a headshot on him dealing an absolutely pitiful 55 damage, but it's enough to make him backpedal a bit before I connect a second headshot for a very satisfying kill. I will admit though that not every interaction with snipers would go this smoothly. In fact, I'd argue that most of them ended quite poorly, because the Australian assassin man can actually one-shot Spy in 0.2 seconds, which isn't ideal by any means. Here again on Gorge on day 43, I get a headshot on this scout and then finish him off with a body shot, so I'm feeling pretty confident when this sniper turns around the corner. So I go to line up the shot and yep. You have to drop a nice shot in text chat and scenarios like that and just move on with your life, because holy shit does it so quickly put you in your damn place. So look, overall, is trying to 1v1 snipers with the Ambassador a good idea? No. Are you likely to come out victorious with the kill? Also no. But in those rare instances during this block of the challenge where I did actually pull it off, it did for just a second make me feel worthwhile, even though in actuality I'm just rotting away at my desk in this 15-year-old video game and doing absolutely nothing with my life. Oh, okay, things got a little real there. Okay, how about we talk about some funny Ambassador combos? And when I say combos plural, I actually mean combo singular. When using the Ambassador, you can't just fire off headshot after headshot in quick succession, as there is actually a 1-second cooldown in between your shots. This is displayed to you visually as after you fire a shot, your crosshair will suddenly enlarge, and you can only hit a headshot again once it has shrunk back down to normal size. Now, this makes sense, as if you're able to hit headshot at the normal attacking interval, you'd be able to dish out over 600 damage in like 3 seconds, which, yeah, it could be a little excessive. So, with this in mind, I found that the best way of approaching duels with enemies was to lead with a headshot and then start spamming body shots after to finish off the job. This worked especially well against light classes, as you can execute this super quick combo of headshot into an immediate body shot, which usually does enough damage to breach the 125 HP threshold, unless you're dueling your opponent from those longer ranges where damage fall off will make you its bitch. Take a look at this clip, and yeah, I know at this point in the video I have said to take a look at this clip maybe 40 times, but suck it up, I've got 600 gigabytes of footage to go through here. Anyway, take a look at this clip on Swiftwater, where I catch John the Fortnite heading to the front line, so I quickly pop him with a headshot into a body shot combo before he can even react, and then find this other sniper moments later, who I also clean up in a similar fashion with just 2 shots. This was definitely my go-to combo whilst using the Ambassador, and one of the reasons I bring it up actually is because, do you remember how I mentioned that I had some really nice strange parts on my Ambi? Well, one of them was headshot kills, and if you ever see a part like this on a strange sniper rifle, you'd usually expect something like 70 to 80% of their total kills to be headshots, and 30 to 20% being body shots. You can see here on my strange AWP that about 77% of my total kills are headshots, but when it comes to my Ambassador, by the time I reached 1,000 kills, it actually only had 189 headshots, meaning the vast majority of my kills were all thanks to body shots, which does sound like it defeats the purpose of even using the weapon in the first place. And look, yeah, okay, I don't have the most precise aim compared to some other gun spies. You're not gonna see some crow type Ambassador plays, coming from the guy who used to exclusively swear by the stock revolver, purely because they couldn't be bothered to get headshots. But with that being said, I do think that 19% headshot ratio is slightly misleading, because when you take a look at that combo we were just talking about earlier, you start by hitting a headshot for the bulk of your damage, and then quickly follow it up with the body shot to secure the kill as fast as possible, and that obviously isn't counted as a headshot kill under the weapon stats. Look, I just want you to know that I swear I can hit headshots, and this isn't at all a massive cope, because I promise to you guys I can hit them, okay? Like, look. I'm on altitude, a scout pops into my vision out of nowhere, and they hit such an elegant flick headshot that I started making noises like this. Oh my... And look, still don't believe me? Well, here on Badwater on day 47, you can see I'm lining up this beautiful shot on a soldier, except no, fuck you, I'm actually lining up a headshot on this invisible spy who you had no idea was there, but I did because I'm the best at the game ever. So look, as you can see by these two clips that have definitely not been cherry-picked from over 1,000 total kills, I'm actually pretty damn good at headshotting with the Ambassador, and don't let the fake news of my headshot kill strange counter convince you otherwise. Now, one of the more interesting aspects I found whilst playing Gunspy was actually separate to the Ambassador entirely, and related more to our knife, the Spicicle. For those who don't know, if you're fighting a pyro and have taken burn damage, you can swap to your Spicicle to melt it, making it disappear from our hand, but this does give us some nice upsides, such as being fireproof for a full second, and also prevents us from taking any afterburn damage for another 10 seconds after that. Now, having to wait 15 seconds for your knife to recharge can be problematic when playing Spy normally, but if we're almost exclusively using our Ambassador, well, it's a whole different story, because we basically gain a bunch of almost free defensive upsides whenever we are versing a pyro. Take a look here on day 47 on Badwater, where a pyro pushes straight into me, melting me down to 19 HP instantly, but because I swapped to my Spicicle and stopped the flame damage immediately, I'm able to stay alive long enough to connect a final shot on them to secure the kill. Or again here on day 44 on Barn Blitz, a confident pyro starts to bum rush me, so I activate my Spicicle, giving me some extra breathing room to line up this clean little headshot. Now, I will admit that even though this was technically the Gunspy portion of the challenge, there were times where I would go for backstabs. Yeah, I know, I'm a fraud, but if I somehow end up behind a 300 HP heavy, am I really going to use my Ambassador, which probably won't even be enough to kill him in time, when his back is being offered to me on a silver platter? This did lead to some slight issues though, as there were instances where I was about to go and secure some stupidly easy stab with my Spicicle, or maybe there was some 1 in a million chain stab lining up, but because a single particle of fire would come into contact with my poor French flesh, I was left with nothing. My Spicicle would melt, I'd have no knife, leaving me in an incredibly awkward situation where I'd often have to use my dead ringer to bail as quickly as possible and cry over the fact I just missed an opportunity to pop off. Take a look at this clip on day 47 on Borneo, where a heavy is absolutely clueless to my existence. He's overhealed with 360 HP, meaning it would take a comical amount of time to kill him with my Ambassador, so I go for the stab instead, except right before I can actually get it, this stupid pyro fires his scorch shot from behind, meaning, uh-oh, my Spicicle is gone, and I can no longer stab anything for 15 seconds. How good. It did happen pretty frequently, but because this was the Gunspy block of the challenge, I tried not to be phased by it too much, as I should have been using my Ambassador in the first place anyway, but it was definitely a hassle at times. I won't talk too much more about the Spicicle here because there's a dedicated section with it coming up, but just know it synergizes really well if you're playing Gunspy, and you only have to be cautious when you go for the occasional backstab. But look, on day 48 of the challenge, on a very sad game of 2-Foot, where I was eagerly anticipating the sweet release of never having to play Ambassador Spy again because the past 8 days of playing Gunspy were so damn underwhelming, I actually hit 1,000 kills. Now you may notice it took a fair bit longer than usual to reach 1,000 kills with the Ambassador, and that was because I missed a couple of days over the weekend where I was down having a good time in the Australian Capital Territory. So overall, this block of the challenge had less kills than hours played compared to the others. I do actually have some closing thoughts on Gunspy here because, man, I was looking so forward to using the Ambassador, but it just turned out to be super underwhelming. Don't get me wrong, the Ambassador is still a fun weapon. It's just that when you have to force yourself to use it consistently and you're left shooting off 18 damage peanuts across the map at some heavy who couldn't care less about your existence, it can be a little draining. I definitely think the stock revolver would have been a more consistent and reliable choice, and because my headshot aim was less than stellar on occasion, I could have just ended up dealing more damage overall with that, but it already had 1,000 kills, so I just got stuck exclusively with the Ambassador. Also, this block of the challenge scared me because if it was this painful getting an Ambassador to 1,000 kills whilst playing Gunspy, then how much more painful was it going to be to get my Enforcer to that many kills? And if you're sitting there thinking, elmaxo, what even is the Enforcer, and why do you keep bringing it up in such an ominous tone? You'll see. You'll see soon enough. In this block of the challenge, I accumulated a total of 1,342 kills and died 658 times, leading to a surprisingly decent KD of 2.04, which kind of surprised me. It did make sense because I had a lot of defensive utility in the Spicicle and Deadringer, meaning my survivability was really good, and as I was playing Gunspy, I didn't need to be constantly throwing myself into super dangerous situations to get backstabs, meaning I was dying less overall. My spy time increased from 150 hours and 34 minutes to 166 hours and 52 minutes for a total of 16 hours and 28 minutes, meaning I was now 13 hours behind schedule, which is getting more and more worrying with every passing block of the challenge. But whatever, we still had a lot of time on our hands, and it wasn't a super daunting margin to make up for. It just meant I was going to be playing a fair bit more Spy every day for the second half of the challenge, and god, I've said this after every block, I suck at managing my time. Honestly, I was just happy to have finished up with Gunspy at this point. I was excited to move on to literally anything else in Spy's arsenal at this point, and fortunately for us, there was about to be another exciting change of pace in the next block coming up. Day 50. Would you look at that? We were officially halfway through the challenge at this point, and to be honest with you, I think I was actually starting to wrap my head around this whole Spy thing. I will admit though that the weapons we had cycled through in the challenge thus far were the big hitters that every Spy player loved. I'm talking about the stock knife with its reliability, the big earner with its speed and its ability to gap close so effectively, and of course the Kunai with its ability to single-handedly tear through entire teams. But it was time to get a little bit more wacky with our knife selection, because in this block of the challenge, we were going to be trying out the Your Eternal Reward. Now, from the get-go, I have to admit something about my mindset towards this knife, as I was 99% certain that the second I hit 1,000 kills with it, I was going to be moving on to something else. Now, this might sound a little prejudiced given I hadn't even used it yet, but my expectations were not particularly high going into this block of the challenge, but to be honest with you, was actually surprisingly good. For those unaware, there are two upsides to the Your Eternal Reward. Firstly, and the whole gimmick the weapon is centered around, is that you instantly steal the disguise of the person you backstab. As you know with the other knives, the moment you hit a stab, your disguise vanishes and you're exposed to the world like Mr. Krabs is in that one episode of SpongeBob where he outgrows his shell, making us vulnerable to the enemies around us. However, the Your Eternal Reward flips this dynamic on its head, as rather than giving us overheal or a speed boost after getting a stab, we instantly gain our victim's disguise, helping us to quickly blend in with our environment. The other upside to the Your Eternal Reward is the fact our backstabs are silent, but yet again we need to whip out a big ol' asterisk here because it's only half true. Yes, when we brutally murder someone they'll no longer scream out in agony as their limp corpse hits the ground, but enemies are still able to hear that meaty sound our knife makes when it hits an enemy and the sound of their ragdoll colliding with the ground, which makes this silent killer stat more of a quieter killer, but we'll get back to that later. Of course, you can't get anything for free in this world, so these two upsides are accompanied with two drawbacks. Firstly, the 33% faster cloak drain rate, which is by no means ideal, but the other stat is the real kicker here, as to disguise as an enemy, you know that core mechanic to Spy's gameplay loop, we have to use up our entire cloak bar. Anything less than 100% means you are unable to disguise entirely unless you're able to get a backstab, and as you can imagine, this is pretty brutal to play around, and oh boy did it take some adjusting to early on. The first thing I learnt you have to do with the Your Eternal Reward is make sure you disguise whilst you're in your spawn room, as it's the only location on the map where it won't cost any of your cloak bar. This isn't the ideal place to be disguising because you usually want to be picking something that is fitting of whatever situation you find yourself in once you're on the front line, but if you're in your spawn room you won't have any idea of what's going on, so you just have to make an educated guess. If it happens to be a bad kit and you realize this is your running to the front line, well, that's tough luck, as to swap your disguise up, you have to forfeit your entire cloak bar, meaning you have lost the single most important tool in your kit until it recharges. This can put you in some really awkward situations like in this clip on Frontier from day 50, where I'm using the cloak and dagger, which is a new invis watch, but we'll touch on that later, and I managed to get behind the enemy team. The only issue is, I have no disguise selected, meaning I have to wait 10 seconds for my cloak to come back just to lose it all when I disguise as this scout, where I then have to wait another 5 seconds just so I have a little bit of cloak in my bar to actually go and play the game with. My first 2 days with the Your Eternal Reward was basically me wrapping my head around how janky this was, as two of my core mechanics, namely going invisible and disguising, have been flipped entirely on their head, and as you're probably able to guess, things didn't start off all that crash hot, and this was definitely the most jarring change I had experienced so far in swapping loadouts. I mean god, my first game on Upward was an absolute disaster as I was basically getting myself killed on cooldown with every play I tried to pull off. This is also probably a good time to mention what I alluded to earlier, but after 30 days straight with the Deadringer, I thought it was time to say goodbye and give a new option a bit of a chance. So to pair with the Your Eternal Reward, I decided to go with the Cloak and Dagger. Now, relative to the Deadringer, which fundamentally changes how you play Spy, the cloak and dagger isn't too far removed from how the stock invis watch works. Rather than having our cloak last for a set amount of time, the cloak and dagger drains its charge depending on how much we move. For example, if we run in a straight line, the invis watch will last 10 seconds, whereas the cloak and dagger will only last for 6.6 seconds, meaning it has 35% less charge overall. However, if you decide to do something like crouch walk whilst invisible, which makes us move substantially slower, our cloak can last for almost a full minute. And if we don't move at all, well, we actually gain our charge back, meaning we can stay invisible for as long as we like, as long as we aren't moving. This encourages a much more patient and passive playstyle where you can watch over your enemies like a hawk and wait for the one ideal moment before you decide to uncloak, making it function in the exact opposite way that the Dead Ringer does, which encourages you to run directly at the entire enemy team and face tank as much damage as possible before decloaking in a hyper aggressive spot. Now I will admit that swapping to the cloak and dagger at the same time as swapping to the Your Eternal Reward probably amplified some of those growing pains I experienced early on in the first 2 days especially, but hey, I thought they would synergize nicely together, and because I also swapped back to the Lestrange in my revolver slot, which as you remember gives us that additional cloak time, I thought it would all piece together to make a nice little loadout. And to be honest, it kinda did. I found that the Your Eternal Reward definitely shined brightest when it came to hitting chain stabs, and that's mostly thanks to its silent killer mechanic. Now yes, we touched on it before, and whilst it isn't technically a silent kill, it is drastically quieter relative to a normal stab, as the screams of your enemies is what usually gives away your position. Any competent player will immediately snap behind them when they hear that regular backstab audio cue, but with the Your Eternal Reward, the sounds of explosions, gunfire, and hoovy voice lines will usually cover up that faint stabbing sound effect, meaning you can actually have the single most reliable way of chain stabbing competent opponents, which is nothing to scoff at. I can't tell you how many chain stabs have fallen apart up until this point in the challenge, because one of the 5 enemies I'm approaching from behind actually plays with their volume on and is able to shut me down immediately after I get that first kill. But with the Your Eternal Reward, I mean, just look at this clip on Frontier from day 50 where I secure perhaps the fastest 4 times chain stab of my life without a single opponent being aware of it. It's only once I bump into this engineer that somebody realizes that a third of their team just evaporated off the face of the earth. Or here again on Frontier 2 days later, I get a stab on this pyro, this sniper, and it's only once I kill the medic and he stops healing the soldier in demo that they actually turn around and suspect something is wrong. I also found that the silent killer mechanic is especially powerful in situations where the whole enemy team is concentrated on the objective, such as on a last push or last defense, where you can stack up stab after stab on players who are too focused on pushing the cart and holding the front line. Take a look here on day 54 on Upward, where I am able to pick up 5 stabs on enemies as they respawn because they are so focused on my teammates who are funneling into pushing the objective over the point, giving me a free ticket to all of their unprotected spinal cords. Now admittedly, Spy prospers in an environment like this ordinarily, but when you have the added ability of no screaming victims and an instant disguise in the position your enemy just was, it makes it so damn easy to blend into your surroundings, as if someone does happen to turn around or quickly check their back, all they'll see is a maybe slightly suspicious looking teammate, but given there was no scream, no pop-up in the kill feed, and the enemy team is about to capture the objective, well, it's probably better they turn around and focus on the front line in the balance of probabilities here. With the time I spent on the Your Eternal Reward, I honestly start to think that there's an argument to be had about this silent killer mechanic being stronger than the instant disguise mechanic, and whilst they're both undoubtedly very valuable, I really can't emphasize how much more consistently I was pulling off these chain stabs with the Your Eternal Reward, and it genuinely surprised me as to how powerful it was. Well, that was until I stabbed a heavy. I found that it isn't all sunshine and rainbows with Your Eternal Reward when it comes to chain stabbing, because yes, instantly disguising as your opponent is very powerful for tricking your enemies, but if you happen to stab a soldier or heavy midway through your chain stab, well, your movement speed is going to come to a grinding halt, making it way harder to get any other stabs unless your opponents aren't moving that much. Here on day 53 on Upward, I drop down on this heavy to get a stab before cloaking away, and when I go back in to get this engineer, my movement speed is so comically slow that I'm caught out by this spy checking pyro, and the only reason I managed to escape is because he accidentally air blasts me to safety up on this high ground. Also, before we go any further, I have to admit something very embarrassing that the Your Eternal Reward made me realize here during this part of the challenge. You know how I was just talking about stabbing heavies and moving slower as a byproduct? Well, when you play Spy normally, you tend to disguise as classes like Scout, Medic, or Spy, so you can maintain your movement speed as you move around the map. Makes sense, right? Well, because I never really had a reason to disguise as slower classes like Soldier or Heavy in the past until using the Your Eternal Reward, it led to perhaps the most embarrassing moment of my TF2 career, and let me just explain how the cogs turned in my brain here. You can see I have recently stabbed a soldier and am therefore disguised as him, meaning I move slower around the map with his base movement speed. So I think, okay, I wonder if Soldier can make this jump here on Frontier, and oh my god, he can? Well, whatever, I flank around only to get caught out by this engineer, so I immediately run away and go invisible, but as I do this I realize, I'm moving kinda quickly right now. So I decloak to get the health and ammo packs, and then you can see my realization in real time as to one of Spy's core cloaking mechanics. Oh, wait, when you're invis... Is that... You keep the... Oh, I have just learned a core Spy mechanic. What? When you're invis, like, as a class that you're like a soldier with lower movement speed, you walk at Spy speed when you're invis.
Dude, yeah, you didn't know that?
Haven't
you been playing Spy for 50 days?
Dude, yeah, I only disguise as a medic, scout, and spy, so I don't lose my movement speed. Oh my god. That's crazy. So, yeah, I'm not proud to admit it, but after more than 4,000 hours in TF2, it was only in that very moment that I learnt that you don't maintain the slower movement speed of classes like Heavy and Soldier when you go invisible, and you actually revert to Spy's default movement speed when no one can see you. Yeah, I know, thank you, I'm very talented, and deeply grateful for my platform where I educate people about a game that I seem to know nothing about. I always just assumed you would move slower whilst invisible too when you had a slower disguise equip, but nope, it only took me half a year's worth of hours in this video game to learn that fundamental mechanic. Anyway, with that genuinely awful experience out the way, I think one of the best things that the Eurotunnel reward and Cloak and Dagger combo taught me during this block of the challenge was patience, which was a bit of a drastic shift to what I had been doing for the last 30 days straight. I had been placing a greater emphasis on trick stabs, using the Dead Ringer aggressively, and trying to farm as many kills as possible for almost a month now, but with these two guys equipped, I noticed that the way I played Spy shifted drastically. I spent a lot more time invisible, just standing still and becoming fully aware of my environment around me. It began to teach me to focus on respawn times more, to know when opponents would be coming, and playing so passively just ended up giving me a new perspective to approach Spy from. You know, you don't always have to force plays when the situation isn't going to work out, which I sometimes found myself doing under the guise of limit testing when I had the Dead Ringer equipped, and whilst I think that is important to improving at the game, so is patience when it comes to Spy. Take a look here on day 54, where I spend more than 30 seconds invisible to ensure that 1, the enemy team is fully distracted when pushing the cart around the corner, and 2, no one is respawning at that moment, meaning that I wouldn't be randomly flanked before I reach my opponent. And look, 1 stab on the Heavy, and 1 stab on the Soldier. See, I swear, patience can be cool, guys. And look here again on Frontier. Frontier again? Why is every clip been on... Anyway, it was day 50 and I see a pyro come around the corner with overheal, and I know this because of the little particles coming off him, meaning I have to hold off my attack for a few seconds as a medic isn't going to be too far behind, and lo and behold, my patience is rewarded with 2 nice stabs. Had I pushed earlier, that demo would have eradicated me, so reading your environment and playing patiently is vital to succeeding on Spy, until you're invisible in a corner for 40 seconds just to die to a random crit before you can do anything. Yeah, no, that happened. On P here on day 53, I was literally invisible for close to 50 seconds before a demo man was able to cave my head in with a critical VB long neck swing. I guess that is the risk you always run whilst playing Spy, and if you try to plan for literally every possible variable, something will still manage to come up and fuck you over, no matter how patiently you're playing. I will say that I definitely prefer the more aggressive playstyle, just because it's a lot more mechanically engaging than, well, sitting in a corner for minutes at a time, but I'm really glad I got to use the Eurotunnel reward for a little section of the challenge here, because it gave me some valuable perspective on the other ways you can play Spy, and it really did exceed my expectations. Honestly, I might have to revisit this weapon sometime in the future, because I really think it does have the potential to be a pretty damn good side grade. But anyway, as I predicted at the start of this segment, the Eurotunnel reward was going to be shelved as soon as it hit 1,000 kills, and that happened on the end of day 54, meaning we have ticked yet another weapon off the list. But elmaxo, you might be saying to yourself, what did you do for the rest of this 10-day block if you already got 1,000 kills by day 54? Well, my mentality at this point in the challenge was to tick off all the, how do I put it, less desirable Spy unlocks so that I could spend time focusing on one specific loadout for the final stretch of the challenge and get really good at using whatever that was. And let's just say there's weapons like the Eurotunnel reward, like the Spysicle, and like the, oh god, Enforcer, which I need to get up to 1,000 kills before I could start grinding one loadout exclusively. And so, that brings us to the final knife which we had to reach 1,000 kills for the challenge, and that was the Spysicle. Now don't worry, I'm not going to go anywhere near in depth on this unlock as I did for the Eurotunnel reward, partially because we've already talked about it, and partially because it's, well, kind of boring. Now, that's not to say it's bad, actually far from it, because I ended my time with the Spysicle with a KD of 2.61, which is the highest I had out of any of the knives for the challenge so far, and that's because I learned it's a super safe pick. When you pair it with something like the Dead Ringer and Lestrange, you become an absolute defensive beast who can escape easily from situations you would otherwise die in. But remember, as I mentioned before during our Gunspy days, this comes at the cost of having your stabs absolutely cucked every once in a while by some cross-map flame particle that melts your Spysicle because because the hitbox is stupid, and I hate pyro. This becomes especially annoying when you're attempting to trick stab a pyro, because they're able to melt your knife before you're able to get into the correct position, and this is the reason that makes the Spicicle a literal non-starter for most spy mains. Now admittedly, I don't have many clips of this happening, because trying to trick stab a pyro when you have the Spicicle equipped is just about as likely as Solarlight making a video on something that isn't Demonite related, but I did find a moment where I was feeling extra confident for whatever reason and did try to give it a go. Here during the Gunspy days on Frontier again, I tried to bait a flog pyro up this hill so I can go for a stair stab, and just as you'd expect, I come into contact with the fire, meaning my Spicicle is gone and I have to pack my bags and leave the country as fast as possible. Unless you're able to maneuver in such a way that you dodge the pyro's constant stream of fire as you attempt to trick stab, it's going to be pretty unlikely that you're actually able to pull something off. If you had to ask me when I think the Spicicle functions best, it'd probably be when there is just one pyro on the enemy team, otherwise you're just going to be missing out on so many stab opportunities due to random spy checks, and that is not going to be fun for you at all. I actually distinctly remember this one game I had on Frontier on day 57, where there were maybe 4 pyros constantly patrolling glass when I was attacking, and I was literally incapable of getting into position, let alone backstab some people, because my Spicicle was melted for like 90% of the game, so at times like this, you probably just want to swap off spy entirely, but unfortunately, I didn't have that luxury afforded to me in this challenge. Look how many pyros they have! Oh golly! What I found to be the most infuriating part about the Spicicle though is that, yeah, you might get lit on fire and escape with your invulnerability, but then you're left for 15 seconds waiting for the damn thing to regen, and it just creates a lot of extra downtime in between your plays, which drastically slows down the tempo of your gameplay. And I mean, come on, with the world we live in where I probably need to have Subway Surfers gameplay at the bottom of the screen of this video to ensure people make it past the 7-second mark, it's safe to say that the Spicle's ideal playstyle feels much more slower paced and honestly boring relative to other unlocks like the Kunai or Big Earner. I don't have much more to say about the Spicicle outside of this because it's basically just a stock knife with the added bonus of giving you an easy escape tool against pyros if you don't want to try and trick stab them, which admittedly did lead me to have a really good KD because I was taking less risky plays, but come on now, that isn't the fun way of playing spy. Late on day 57 on Borneo, I did end up securing the 1000th kill on my Spicicle, which did actually surprise me a bit as I wasn't really keeping track of it, but that officially meant that I had secured 1000 kills on every knife at this point of the challenge, meaning I was free to use whatever one I thought would make me play the best. This meant at this point of the challenge, there were now just 3 weapons remaining to get 1000 kills on. First was my Latrange, which was already pretty close at this point with 800 kills on it. Second was the Diamondback, which still had a bit of a ways to go with 400 on it, but I wasn't too worried about racking up kills on that one. And thirdly, here we go, the Enforcer. It's the Enforcer. The Enforcer was still at 0, and I still had to get to 1000. But hey, that's a problem future me has to deal with, and when I say future me, I actually mean past me, because I am future me right now doing the voiceover for this video, and I know how it goes with the Enforcer. It's pretty bad. It's actually really bad, but we'll get there when we get there. Anyway though, one thing I haven't really touched on so far in this block of the challenge is that we were now going back to using knives, which meant we were also back to trick stabbing, and even though I hadn't done much of it in the previous 10-day block of the challenge with all the Gunspy stuff going on, I got straight back into it like I had never even stopped. What was continuing to amaze me with my progress thus far into the challenge was how far my stair stabs had come and how much better they had gotten. During those early blocks of the challenge, it always felt super clunky, my movement was off, and I was only getting them against the most clueless of enemies, but nowadays, it was starting to feel like second nature as I was growing increasingly comfortable with them on a subconscious level. I wasn't overthinking the enemy's position, my position when I had to jump or anything like that. It all just flowed really smoothly when it came time to execute a stair stab, and it was feeling really good. I think what epitomizes my progress the most is a clip I hit here on day 54 on Mountain Lab, where I actually pulled off my first blind stair stab of the challenge. Oh, I finally did it! 54 days to hit that type of trick stab! If you don't know, the reason it's so hard to hit one of these is because it's entirely dependent on your game sense and understanding of movement speeds to predict when your enemy will be close enough for you to jump backwards over their head to get the stab. For every stair stab I have hit prior to this one, I'm usually looking directly at the enemy as they come towards me, and therefore can time my jump a lot better because you actually have that visual cue of their model moving. Now, this isn't just some flashy play you can pull to look really cool, as it actually serves a really valuable function in that it's way less predictable relative to a normal stair stab. When you see a spy perched up at the top of a staircase on Harvest, death staring you as you approach them, it doesn't take 11 of engineers' PhDs to understand, he's probably going to try and trick stab me here. But with your back turned, the opponent chasing you is 1, not going to be expecting a trick stab as much because you're not staring them dead in the eyes, making it super obvious, and 2, they have less time to react to it when you do eventually jump. Now admittedly, I think I could have been pulling off blind stair stabs like that one on Mountain Lab much earlier in the challenge, but I just kind of forgot they existed and only started attempting them after my time on Gunspy. From this point forward though, I did start getting them much more consistently, and it just goes to show how far my prediction skills and general game sense on Spy had come since day 1, so that was nice to see. see. Now, to tie everything up for this block of the challenge, I think it's time I have a slightly overdue conversation with you about the engineer. Now, before heading into this 100-day challenge, I always assumed that because Spy is equipped with the Sapper, an unlock designed exclusively to counter engineer, and his pesky little buildings, that I surely wouldn't have any issues dealing with him. I mean, have you seen Meet the Spy? He literally slides his Sapper across the floor gangster style and proceeds to execute an engineer with one bullet to the head. So if we're going off the game's canon, yeah, we should be fine, right? Well, it turned out to be a little more complicated than that, and let me start with one quick fact. Oh my god, Engineer is surprisingly annoying to deal with. The whole Spy vs Engineer duel is centered around the fact that you basically have to deal with two opponents when fighting him. There's the Texan himself, and the auto-tracking mechanical nightmare that is his sentry gun. Now, the most common way of dealing with this conundrum is you first backstab the Engineer, which reveals you to the sentry, but before it can lock onto you and gun you down, you quickly whip out the Sapper and disable it that way. However, this isn't always how things go in practice, and I quickly learned through this challenge that a level 3 sentry gun could react in a fucking heartbeat to my presence and launch off a bunch of rockets that would instantly annihilate me before I could even react. Take a look at this clip from day 48 on Badwater, where I'm using my map knowledge to get to this high ground. I drop down to stab this heavy, and no joke, within 18 frames of getting the kill, I am instantly annihilated by a set of rockets from the sentry gun. Or from earlier in the challenge on day 37 on Badwater, I see the Engineer, I plan to stab him with my big earner and then use the speed boost to quickly go over and sap his sentry before it can kill me, but again, within half a second, a set of 4 rockets is rapidly approaching my location and denying me from playing the game. Now, yes, I do realize that I'm dying so comically fast in these two clips because the sentry gun is already looking my direction, meaning there is no buffer period of it having to turn towards me. So technically, if I stab my stab such that the sentry gun is facing as far away as possible, there probably would be more room to get the sap off in time, but god, you already have to juggle like 200 variables of Spy with knowing where each player on the team is, the level of health, their movement pattern, what health packs are up, and all that other garbage. So the last thing I want to be conscious of before I go in for a gangster ass play is the fucking degree of rotation that the sentry is facing to make sure I don't get nuked the frame after I get a backstab. This is also kind of embarrassing to admit, but I also seem to have a slight issue with the act of actually placing my Sapper on an engineer's buildings as Spy. I know this sounds weird, but I have a frightening amount of clips where I would look in a sentry's direction with my Sapper equipped, but for whatever reason, I wouldn't actually place it down. Look here on Dust Bowl, all the way back from day 2 of the challenge, where I find myself in a super advantageous spot whilst invisible. So I drop down to get some stabs, go to sap the sentry so I don't die immediately, but I don't actually place it, and die immediately after my first stab. You can actually hear the immense disbelief in my voice from my live reaction. I sapped it, I literally sapped it, this game should pop. And look, I would love to say that this got better over time, but no, it didn't really. There is so much footage of me being unable to sap stationary targets, and it does make me slightly concerned for my own mental well-being watching these back in retrospect. And god, whilst we're on the topic of my mental well-being, don't get me started on situations where there happens to be multiple engineers with multiple sentries, because if there's one thing that made me angry beyond belief in this challenge, it was this. I'm going to spare you my hour-long rant on this topic for the sake of brevity. Well, I mean, the video's probably going to be 4 hours long already, but just know that if you're in a situation like Badwater Last, where one sentry is under map room and one sentry is at bottom, what are you supposed to do? If you stab and sap one of them, the other sentry will gun you down, and all their teammates will snuff you out and murder you too, and by the time you respawn and come back, that fucker already has another level 2 sentry up again, so you basically become the TF2 equivalent of Sisyphus rolling the boulder up the hill in an eternal loop of trying to kill sentry guns. The only thing that can save you from this endless cycle is of course your own teammates and organizing a coordinated push, but come on, let's just be real, that's not gonna happen very often in a match of casual. Like, I'll try, but we just know it's not gonna happen. There were so many points where I'd be tilted beyond belief and start spam stabbing all the engineers' stuff on repeat because I was unable to get stabs, and would just have to pray that my team would coincidentally push at that very moment all of their stuff was disabled. But yeah, as you can probably expect, that very rarely happened. But look, even as surprisingly annoying as dealing with engineers turned out to be, you do still counter them in the one way that truly matters, and that's getting their teleporters. To quote the great Uncle Dane, sentries get kills, dispensers save lives, and teleporters win games. Ever since I heard this from Dane in his video on teleporter etiquette, it's always stuck with me, because in your average game of casual TF2, teleporters are essential to victory. Think of Dust Bowl Last on offense once your team has capped the first point. It takes almost 20 seconds to reach the front line again, and when you have 12 people on a team who are dying on cooldown to some crack sticky spamming demo man, that is a lot of wasted time dedicated to just walking. A teleporter basically moves your spawn room forward to wherever the exit is placed, and this is crucial for maintaining the pressure of an offensive push or defensive hold so that you can keep a steady flow of reinforcements without too many gaps. So, when you give one class in the game a watch that allows them to go invisible behind the enemy team without them realizing, and a tool that can disable and slowly drain the health of engineers' buildings, you've just introduced one hell of a counter. And to be honest with you, this might be the single most objectively useful thing you're able to do for your team as spy. It's something I focused on especially hard in the early days of the challenge, as I'd start any round on offense off with disguising as a spy, going invisible, maneuvering behind their entire team, and then sapping and shooting down any of their teleporter entrances at their spawn door. I even remember a specific instance on Borneo on day 11 where I managed to get behind only to be greeted by 5 teleporter entrances at their team spawn. This clip also serves as a great example of why you have to be careful of respawn times when you go into destroy tele entrances, as you can potentially be gunned down in an instant by some random dude who happens to respawn at an unfortunate time. Make sure you use your scoreboard to see how recently enemies have died and plan accordingly, otherwise you may get caught out in a pretty embarrassing fashion. Honestly though, dying to get 1 or 2 teleporter entrances is 100% worth it, as your respawn time of say 8 seconds pales in comparison to the 15 to 20 seconds of extra walking everyone who dies on the enemy team is now going to have to embark on as they respawn. Even though this was something I knew going into the challenge, if there's one single bit of advice I could bestow upon you from this entire video, it's to make sure you target teleporters, because they genuinely win games if they're not dealt with, and you are the best class in the game to destroy them. But let's be real, destroying stationary targets with our sapper isn't all that exciting when it comes to the engineer matchup, but do you want to know what is? Absolutely dunking on that stupid dumb Texan in 1v1s, and there are 2 main ways we can go about this. Number 1 is the big brain Sigma mental outplay, or 2, the flashy mechanical trick stab path. So to explain the first option, I actually have a question for you. If you're playing engineer and hear that your sentry is being sapped, what are you going to do in response? Unless you're some Buddhist monk who believes in detaching themselves from all material things, you're probably going to beeline to your building and remove the sapper, right? I mean, it only makes sense. If you're close enough to fix it, why wouldn't you? Well, as a spy player, I quickly realized in this challenge that we can actually prey on this primal response in the monkey brain of engineer players, because it makes it super easy to predict their movement and where they are likely to path towards. Let me show you a clip so it makes sense. This was from day 7 on Mountain Lab, and I spot the enemy engineer tending to his sentry, so I decide to sap his teleporter to force him to come and repair it, meaning I can now flank around him whilst visible, decloaking behind him and securing a really nice stab on him because his movement was so telegraphed. Or again, here on day 35 on Pier, I'm not entirely sure where the NG is, so I sap his tele and dispenser to force him to reveal himself, and I then jump up on this high ground, leading to a nice drop stab moments later when he attempts to remove the sapper. Look, the only thing I'm going to say about these 2 clips is that so-called free thinkers, when they hear
Spies sapping my sentry,
these were genuinely some of the most rewarding plays I pulled off whilst playing Spy in this challenge, because it just demonstrates a deep understanding of the game, and hey, I think it's pretty cool when you do that. Now I will admit these aren't necessarily the most flashy type of play to pull off, and that's where our second option comes into this, and it's the mechanical outplay. I touched on this before, but if you're not aware, as an enemy spy, you are able to crouch jump onto any of engineers' buildings for a nice little hype boost, which yes, does instantly give away the fact we're a spy because allies aren't able to collide with buildings, but it does provide for a great vantage point to trick stab enemies from. Now I will admit that these clips I'm about to show you are from future days of the challenge, which we haven't covered yet, but it does make sense because if you remember my ability to do basic trick stabs earlier in the video, it wasn't great, but as I developed my stair stabs specifically and my ability to improvise with the environment around me, my ability to use engineer buildings as props for trick stabs did improve later on. So take a look here on day 64 on Borneo, where I spot a nest on the right here, jump in with my sapper to disable it for my team, and then hop on the dispenser for the height to execute a beautiful stair stab on the engineer as he comes around the corner. And again, here on day 97 on Frontier, I execute a similar combo where I sap his sentry, jump on top of it, and get a clean little stair stab as he runs to repair it. This last clip here actually blends in some of those mental outplays we talked about earlier, as sapping his sentry forces him to rush towards it, and therefore makes it a lot easier to predict his movement for our stair stab, meaning there is a bit of overlap between these 2 paths we can take when dunking on engineers. Okay, look, I could keep rattling off here about engineer because I think it is the most interesting matchup Spy has, but given this block of the challenge is already longer than the other ones, and this video has already been going on for however long it's been going on for, let's wrap things up with a quick fire round on engineer. Firstly, my god are there some absolute bot engineers who are extremely fun to fuck with, and I have a bunch of clips of it happening, and they make me feel silly, and they make me giggle. Secondly, it's really funny when you're able to get an engineer sentry to kill their own creator. Very silly, I like it. Thirdly, finding teleporter exits unguarded can rack you up some insane kill streaks if they're placed in bad spots, and it legit just farms you kills for your strangers. Fourthly, oh my god, I learned that the Thompson can one-shot you if you're using the Kunai, which is also incredibly funny, and happened to me a total of 2 times in the entire challenge out of like 10,000 deaths. So that was pretty awesome too. And finally, I lied to you. I've done that a lot in this video, and I'm doing it again, because there's another elephant in the room right now. You see, there was a 3rd hidden addition to my loadout in this block of the challenge, but yet again, I've avoided it this whole time, because this one specifically doesn't deserve to see the light of day. So if we take a look at my sapper slot, I started using the red tape recorder in this section of the video. Oh god. Sorry about that, even mentioning this thing triggers a visceral reaction in my intestines. Okay, well, the red tape recorder doesn't feel dirty to use like the Diamondback does, it instead just feels bad to use, because, it is bad. I don't know why it exists. I'm barely going to talk about it because I know this is the 100 Days of Spy challenge, so I feel obliged to at least mention it. Okay, basically, the point of the red tape recorder existing is that it de-levels an engineer's building as it saps it, which is actually a really cool concept. So if we apply it to their level 3 sentry, for example, and it takes them too long to get to it, by the time they do eventually repair it, it'll be level 2, or potentially even a level 1 sentry, meaning they have to sink a bunch more resources into it to get it back to where it was. Okay, that sounds kind of cool. So what's my big issue here? Well, I'm going to show you one clip, alright? I'm not going to edit it, you're just going to watch it, and you tell me what happens, okay? Okay. Yep, that's right. From the moment I sapped that teleporter, it took 27 seconds and 16 frames exactly to destroy it. Do I have to say anything else? Do you know how long that is compared to the normal sapper? Maybe some nerd emoji looking ass 10,000 hour spy main will say, well actually there's some highly niche uses for the red tape recorder in a competitive environment. I don't want to hear it. It's bad, I hated it, it sucks, it takes so much time, it's actually comical. I used it for like another 4 days in the challenge after this block and then swapped immediately back to the normal sapper because I couldn't take it any longer. This stupid, strange red tape recorder is going to spend 1 trillion years never seeing the light of day in my inventory until the inevitable heat death of the universe, where it will finally feel the sweet embrace of death and proceed to haunt me for eternity in the afterlife. I have nothing else to say, I don't care if I'm being stubborn, and it actually might have some practicality, because it doesn't. It sucks, I hate it, go away, please leave me alone. And there we have it. Just a normal guy wrapping up this normal section of his normal video who didn't just rant about an item in a game for like 3 minutes. So, hey, let's take a look at the numbers for this block of the challenge. I accumulated a total of 2,235 kills and died 946 times, leading to a record high KD of 2.36. But because this block had 2 distinct sections where I used the Eurotunnel reward for one half and the Spicycle for another, the numbers are slightly different. With the Eurotunnel reward, I got a total of 1,079 kills and died 502 times, leading to a still really impressive KD of 2.15, but it was actually with the Spicycle that I put up some LeBron James level numbers, as we got a total of 1,159 kills and died just 444 times, leading to an insane KD of 2.61, which was my best in the challenge so far. That combination of the Spicycle and Dead Ringer really meant I wasn't dying much because of that crazy level of defensive utility, so I was really happy to see that high of a KD, and it actually made me consider the Spicycle a little bit more for the future. My spy time also increased from 166 hours and 52 minutes up to 188 hours and 22 minutes for a total of 21 hours and 30 minutes, which is more than the 20 minimum I needed, but we were still running a bit behind schedule, meaning, yep, I'm gonna say it again, I had to sink more time in the coming blocks of the challenge to reach that elusive 280 hours on spy. Also, I have nowhere else to put this, but on day 56, someone accused me of having Lestrange aim hacks after missing half my shots, and this was the result. So I'm not actually cheating. Oh, so 6 people voted yes. I hit him. What? I got kicked! What? So, yeah, I guess that was a milestone of the challenge. And actually, on the topic of the Lestrange, it actually hit 1,000 kills on day 59 of the challenge, meaning we could tick off yet another weapon from the list. We were actually getting very close to reaching 1,000 kills on every spy weapon at this point, meaning we would soon be able to tick off that big goal we set at the start of the challenge and could then exclusively focus on maximizing our KD and improving as much as possible for the rest of the challenge. So, what was the only thing keeping me away from that? Well, there was one very powerful but very dirty revolver that needed 1,000 kills, and a painfully mediocre one that needed it too. My rationale going into this next block was that I wanted to start designing my final loadout for the challenge once I had finished getting 1,000 kills on the Enforcer and Diamondback. My game plan was to hopefully wrap up with those two weapons in the next 10 days, meaning I could have the final 30 days of the challenge to dedicate to one loadout exclusively, and I could just spend all my time grinding it out and getting really good with it. The only problem here is that I wasn't fully sure what weapons I wanted to use in each slot just yet. The only option I was certain on was using the Dead Ringer, which I'm going to talk about even more later on in this video because holy shit, this thing really grew on me over this 100-day challenge, and I knew it was definitely my favorite relative to the Invis Watch and Cloak and Dagger. When it came to the knife slot, I was tossing up a lot of options here. Even though I wasn't the biggest fan of the Spicicle and how it forced you to play more defensively, it had gotten me a crazy ass KD and was objectively the best option to run with if we're going off the numbers. But I would be lying if I didn't say that I was much more interested in two other candidates, namely the Kunai and the Big Earner. I really did enjoy using both of these options because of the upsides they granted once you got a stab, but I realized that whilst my Kunai had something like 3,500 kills on it at this point, and my Big Earner only had about 1,500, meaning there was a pretty big mismatch here. I figured that the logical thing to do here would be to use my Big Earner in this block of the challenge and see if it grows on me any more than it already has, and I could therefore come to a more informed decision whether I want to use it or its brother, the Kunai. This was all excellent, but before we could figure out what revolver I was going to use, we did still have some loose ends to tie up in the Diamondback, which needed 500 or so kills on it, and okay, I've been putting this off for long enough. Let's just do it. The Enforcer. I needed 1,000 kills on the Enforcer, and after using the Ambassador and how underwhelming it was getting 1,000 kills on that thing, let's just say I was not looking forward to using this stupid little comically small revolver for even a second. Unfortunately though, it was one of the final two weapons we had to get to 1,000 kills, so there was no point in delaying it any longer. So, let's take a look at its stats, shall we? The main draw of this weapon can be seen in its first stat, with the 20% damage bonus to enemies whilst disguised, which gives us a nice little bit of extra punch on that first shot we fire off in a duel. In fact, this damage bonus is enough to allow us to two-shot light classes at close range, and when I say close range, I really mean it, but more on that in a bit. The next stat is perhaps one of the most bizarre in all of TF2, and I'm not joking when I say that, because the Enforcer has the ability to pierce damage resistance effects and bonuses. If you haven't played TF2 before, that might not sound that strange, but if you take a deeper look, there really isn't that many damage resistance effects in the game. The most prominent example is probably the Vaccinator, but aside from that, there's the Fist of Steel on Heavy, and the Battalion's backup active effect, but outside of that, there really isn't too much, which just makes for a bizarre stat for a weapon to have. I will say that I wasn't aware of this during the challenge itself, but the most practical use for this damage piercing stat is that it does do extra damage to wrangled sentries, making the Enforcer an actually pretty viable option at doing that, but I didn't get any footage of it because I didn't know it existed, so that's unfortunate. Now, this disguised damage bonus and resistance piercing does come at the cost of a 20% slower firing speed, as well as the inability to hit random crits, which, look, in casual can actually be a significant nerf, and I'm not entirely sure why they felt the need to slap that on top of everything, but it is what it is. So, how did it actually feel to use this thing? Well, in all honesty, it's not that bad. It definitely has its moments, and to be more specific, if you ever find yourself behind the enemy team and happen to stumble across a sniper with the Razorback, you can two-shot their ass before they realize anything has happened. Now, of course, you can two-shot any light class from a close enough range with the Enforcer, but I found myself abusing snipers the most because they're usually isolated from their team and not moving all that much, making it easier to actually hit them. I even had a strange part for snipers killed on my strange Enforcer, and spoiler alert, snipers ended up accounting for just under 20% of my total kills by the end of the challenge, which didn't surprise me whatsoever. I even remember having this one interaction on day 61 on Thunder Mountain where I was repeatedly killing this sniper with the Razorback equipped, and he reached a tipping point after one too many deaths and said I was fucking annoying in chat, which, yeah, I get that. I also found that the additional 20% damage while disguised would randomly come in clutch against opponents who were low on health and fleeing from the front line, as I just happened to stumble across them whilst they were retreating, just to dish out a surprisingly big chunk of damage on them for an easy kill. Also, do you remember earlier how I mentioned that the resistance piercing stat on the Enforcer was a little bizarre because of how niche it is? Well, to show you just how rare it is, I'm going to show you every clip from my 1,000 kills with the Enforcer where this resistance piercing came in useful. Are you ready? Well, here we go. Wait, does this goes through the Fist of Steel damage? The third clip of this item's utility in 700 kills. Yes! 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 I mean, damn. Did you see how excited I was there? That is the overwhelmingly positive reaction of a man finally getting utility out of one of TF2's most niche mechanics. To be honest, I don't even know what the point of this stat is. It was a really awkward rework when they added this, and if Valve ever decides to provide TF2 with any support, I hope they take another look at this revolver because it is genuinely bizarre in how it functions. But elmaxo, I hear you say. You've been absolutely dreading having to talk about the Enforcer throughout this whole video, and to be honest, it sounds like you found the weapon to be fine, so What's your issue here? Well, I realized that I was getting enforcer kills at a pretty slow rate by only using it passively, and to be honest with you, after what I went through with the ambassador, I wanted this process of getting 1,000 kills to go as quickly as possible, which is why on day 64 of the challenge, where I only had 460 kills on it, I decided I was going to start using it exclusively as a really bad gun spy option and ignore my knife entirely. And this, my friends, is where my hatred stems for the painful mediocrity of the enforcer, because this was the beginning of my insanity arc. Alright, I hope you're ready. The stupid two-shot mechanic doesn't even work half the time if you're unlucky enough to be like 2 hammer units too far away, which just turns it into a worse version of stock. The 20% slower firing speed definitely screws with your aim because it doesn't shoot in the same rhythm as the Latran or stock revolver, meaning I have a theory that this makes my flicks less accurate because I'm mistiming them because of my brain's muscle memory, which led me to miss way more shots than I should have. I got so desperate to get 1,000 kills that as soon as we'd win a round and be rewarded with crits, I would beeline straight to the enemy spawn in an instant just to ensure I could be the first one to kill all the defenseless people trying to hide, just to reduce the amount of total kills it would take and therefore speed up the process. And all these factors melded into one big shitstorm of mental turmoil, which had me dreading the challenge for the 3 days it took to get the enforcer to do 1,000 kills. And I mean, just look how I was holding up in this clip. Bro, oh, I can't. Oh my god. Holy shit, if it was a knife it'd be fine, but fucking the enforcer. It wasn't pretty, it sucked ass, it was super painful, and god, I hate the enforcer. It's not even that bad. I just like out of principle and what you did. I don't like you. I don't like you. But ultimately, on day 66, in the warm-up for a turbine game of all things, I secured my last 2 kills necessary for 1,000, meaning we could tick off the second last weapon from our list. I rewatched my reaction. I was editing this section, and oh my god, the genuine pain in my voice is so palpable, and I actually sound so exhausted. It's over. Oh god. This meant we now only had one final weapon to reach 1,000 kills with, and it was the Diamondback, which I swapped to immediately after finishing with the Enforcer. Now don't worry, I did not plan to gun spy with the Diamondback like I did with the Enforcer. Even though I probably could farm kills quicker with it by doing that, this was one of the weapons I was actually tossing up to potentially use for my final stretch of grinding, so I thought I should give it a fair evaluation. And look, before we dive into the last 500 kills I got with the Diamondback, it's important for you to know that my little stint with the Enforcer there was actually a very significant turning point in the challenge, because it marked a very, very noticeable change in my mood towards, well, everything. You know, the novelty of playing Spy had started to wear off at this point, and I was honestly dreading my 3 hours of required playtime every day. If you ask any of my friends who had to endure Discord calls with me during this period, they will attest to the fact that I wasn't very pleasant to be around because the challenge, it wasn't all that fun when you had to grind out thousands of kills on weapons you never wanted to use in the first place. So let me introduce you to a bit of a different side to things here, because it's all been relatively positive with this video up until this point, but I think it's time to take a deeper look into the mental side of playing Spy, and more specifically, just how draining it was. If you haven't gathered it so far from this video, Spy is easily the weakest class in the game, and if anyone tries to tell you otherwise, they are wrong. There's no competition here, and even though you have the potential to pop off as Spy and dominate whole servers, there's an equal and opposite possibility that you will be relentlessly spy checked by a gang of pyros for the entire game, making it physically impossible for you to do anything. There is no other class in the game other than maybe Medic who is so reliant on factors outside of your control to play well, and it makes for a really, really frustrating gameplay loop when you're going up against more competent players, and this was really starting to sink in after more than 2 months of playing Spy every day. I remember when I first started out on this challenge and was wanting to learn as much as possible, I would force myself into literally every situation to fast track my progress and the experience I gained, but I was now at a point where if I joined a server and died one too many times to a particular person or was just generally having a hard time flanking behind, I would simply disconnect and re-queue into a fresh game. This is actually really common amongst high-level Spy mains, and I noticed it a lot during the challenge because I would see the same people either shit-stomping a server and everybody on it with some crazy-ass KD, or they join a game, die a handful of times without creating much impact, just for me to see removed from match by system in chat moments later. At first I found this pretty confusing, but as I played more and more, it just made sense because sometimes you join games where you're not going to do much. Whether it be because their team is competent, they have a lot of spy checkers, or if the map just utterly sucks for you to play on, it's honestly in your best interest to try your luck on a fresh server instead of suffering through hell for 20 minutes. I even remember this one particular game where I wasn't aliasing, so everyone wanted to see what the big famous niche micro celebrity elmaxo was doing, and we ended up with 8 spies. 8 spies. Ordinarily, I think that's funny as fuck, but when I'm trying to max out my KD and improve as much as possible on spy for the purpose of this challenge, I can't say I want to stick around all that long on a server like that, because we are about to get the shit stomped out of us. And if I'm going to be honest with you, I was leaning into this a lot. I'm not proud to say it, but I would get seriously tilted after dying 2 to 3 times without hitting a stab, and rather than trying to play it out and help my team to the best of my ability, I just re-queue. This was probably the first major symptom of my spy brain rot, which began infecting my gameplay, and I'm not proud of it, especially in retrospect. I wish I did stick around in those tougher servers more just to challenge myself, but when you're 2 months deep into playing the same class over and over, day after day, I don't really blame myself for getting a little bit tilted. There was also another option which I resorted to a handful of times, and that's if things weren't going my way and I was getting really angry and was just not wanting to play spy whatsoever. I'd actually swap class entirely and stomp the server for a little bit as a mental reset. I distinctly remember this one instance on Upward where it was just not going my way at all. So to shake things up, I gave Flog Pyro a go for 1 life and proceeded to go on a 17 kill streak on my first attempt, almost getting a godlike, and this left me bewildered. No way, I almost go godlike. I hate spy. I can't do this. 20 more days. Okay. But look, sometimes I would have the mental fortitude to remain in a game. Even though everything was working against me, I'd remain strong, I wouldn't let it get to me, I'd take a deep breath and proceed to get very angry and yell to myself like an insane person. Oh, dude, this game tests my fucking will to live every time I play it. I'm not gonna lie, towards the very end of the challenge, I even resorted to hitting my fan over and over for some immediate stress relief after moments that were especially bullshit, and I ended up breaking it. It's just sitting in my garage now and it won't turn on. I know, I'm a very normal person who deals with their anger in 15-year-old video games in a very normal way, but hey, at least I got a new fan and it's honestly not that much better. I kind of miss my old fan. Whilst we're on the topic of things completely outside of my control, which infuriate me beyond belief, you may have noticed that this video has managed to avoid a glaring issue that TF2 has been suffering from for 3 years now, and that's bots and cheaters. To be honest with you, the first 50 days of this challenge were pretty good, and it was actually very rare that games got infested by bots. Like, yeah, there would be the occasional lobby where I was invis hiding in a corner just for some gibbous wearing spinning sniper bot to instantly headshot me, but barring that, it was actually smooth sailing for the most part. But halfway through the challenge, there seemed to be a major uptick in how many bots were around. You see, with my daily schedule, I was trying to play my spy games from around midday through to 3 PM, which isn't ideal by any means. Because I'm from the great country of Australia, where there are way fewer players in the region, it can actually be hard to fill up servers on casual in the morning to early afternoon. And if you know anything about bots, they love to fill up partially empty servers. Sometimes you could kick them and prevent them from taking full control, but more often than not, seeing 3 to 4 of them join meant it was time to re-queue, which was of course frustrating to deal with, but it's just something we have to live with until Valve decides to pull their finger out of their ass and actually support this game in a meaningful way. Now, it wasn't just bots causing me issues during the tail end of this challenge either, as I was beginning to realize that there's actually a lot of cheaters who prowl around the Australian servers. Because I was playing so much TF2 so consistently, I began learning the in-game names of all the resident cheaters we have here on the Australian servers, and whilst there is no chance in hell I'm ever going to give them the attention they want by name dropping them, there is one specific character I do want to talk a bit about. For the sake of the story, let's call him, how about unemployed loser who has 100 hours in the past 2 weeks consistently on Steam with the weed-themed profile showcase and loves to cheat in the morning because he has nothing better to do with his sad existence. Or Grant for short, we could go with too. I'd been running into him a lot on casual, and even though he didn't always cheat, sometimes he wouldn't do a great job of concealing his aim lock, and the most obvious example of this I could get was here on a game of Snowy Coast. Oh, that's some nice aim lock you've got there. Your flicks are so clean, dude. Why do you cheat so blatantly, you idiot? This was the first time I'd actually gotten somebody cheating on footage, as I realized with this uptick in bots and cheaters, I should probably start documenting it for a section exactly like this in the video. But anyway, he got kicked from the server, I had footage of his blatant aim lock, and that was that. Fast forward 3 days later on Powerhouse, where, oh, the enemy team's top scorer is our good friend Grant. Now, unfortunately, I don't have footage of the full interaction here, but I started calling him out for being a cheater in text chat, and no one was believing me, so I said, fuck it, just give me 1 second. So I went to my editing timeline, found that clip I just showed you on Snowy Coast, rendered it out, uploaded it as an unlisted link to my main elmaxo channel right here, and proceeded to send it to the server as proof of his blatant cheats. Usually I wouldn't be this bothered, but because this guy was a closet cheater and was also really annoying to deal with over text and voice chat when I played with him, I wanted to put in the work to get him kicked as easily as possible. And guess what? It actually worked, and the enemy team got Grant's sorry ass booted from the game. In dire times where Valve isn't going to do anything about cheaters, you gotta take things into your own hands, and that's exactly what I decided to do. So Grant, whenever we cross paths in casual again, you know what you can expect to happen. Hi there, I'm just gonna interrupt for a second here, because I actually found out something that's kind of wholesome. in this story. Whilst I was making the video, I actually went back and checked his Steam profile because I wanted to get some B-roll of like the VIII team profile. I noticed that his name was actually a link to his stream on Kick. So I went and started watching, and he actually told me that he's finished with cheating in TF2. And he's now playing Face at CSGO, where you literally can't cheat because the anti-cheat. And I thought that was really wholesome. I talked to him for a second, and he was like, it seems like he's reformed. He's no longer cheating, which is... Actually, we love to see it. We love to see it. So thank you, Grant. I saw a name drop you, but God bless you. Okay, back to the video. With that delightful dose of pettiness out the way, I do want to wrap things up when it comes to how mentally draining it is to play Spy. I touched on it briefly before, but I truly understand why Spy mains get so frustrated playing this class because it is so reliant on so many factors you just cannot control. Oh, you got a single backstab on a sniper at the start of the round? Yeah, well, they're gonna swap to Pyro now and become your most dedicated hater by spy checking literally everything for the whole game. Yeah, unlucky. Or, oh, you've been chasing someone for a while and are moments away from hitting the stab, but, oh, no, they've turned around at the last frame, and you're now dead. That's tough, man. Or again, you're just trying to flank behind, but have come across 3 pyros who are all spreading their flame particles onto literally every surface of the map to ensure you can't make a single play. I'm sure you'll be fine. It's little moments like this which make Spy so infuriating to play, because I don't think any other class in the game gets this fucked over by random luck and chance. Because the nature of playing Spy is a binary in that you either get a stab or you don't, it makes getting caught out all that much more brutal, because it's not like the other classes where you can have a close duel and emerge as the better player and say a soldier versus soldier matchup because you connected your rockets more accurately. No, you kinda just die if you get unlucky, and this is what started to weigh super heavily on my mental for the remainder of the challenge. I definitely think I was a major dumbass for picking Spy first out of all the classes to do a 100-day challenge with, because I am just of the belief that he is innately the most frustrating class to play, and that really began to take its toll on me as we got deeper and deeper into things. I'm definitely a little biased here and will notice similar moments when I choose to play other classes for extended periods of time, but for now, I can safely say that I understand why Spy mains get so toxic, because their class can feel like a bit of a gamble at times. Okay, now I've gotten all that out the way, I can finally announce that I am done being a big ol' wah crybaby about Spy, and it's time we get back to the mission at hand, aka those final 500 kills on the Diamondback. As I mentioned earlier, the Diamondback is actually a weapon I'm considering to use in my final loadout, because it provides you with an insane level of damage output for just playing Spy how you're supposed to. I know I already mentioned this earlier in the video, but at this point of the challenge, I'm averaging at the very least like 2 stabs per life, which translates to 2 stored crits, and therefore gives me the additional ability to 2-shot 8 of the 9 classes on any given life. The additional level of offensive capability this weapon adds to Spy is genuinely scary, and whilst I was using it in this section, I found so many damn clips of me just laughing to myself at the utter bullshit this weapon can be to play against at times. Look at this clip from day 68 on Bomblitz, where I spot my friend who is on the enemy team, and yeah, it just look.
That's a weird.
There's a Diamondback crit, and there's a second one.
Well,
I just don't think there should ever exist a world in which I, as a Spy, am able to fire 2 bullets at the second healthiest class in the game from this distance and come out on top. It even felt like there was a noticeable uptick in angry messages I got when I was trying to get my final kills on the Diamondback. I mean, just look here on day 71 on altitude, where I got a quick stab on this soldier, meaning I can 2-shot this sniper, and then... I mean, I guess he's not entirely wrong, but it's honestly wild just how many people despise this weapon, and after using it for so much of this challenge, I could definitely understand why. Anyway, on day 71 on Frontier, my beloved, I hit a flick shot that didn't even look like it hit the scout in all honesty, but that was apparently enough to get my 1000th kill, meaning I had officially gotten every single Spy weapon to at least 1000 kills. We could finally tick off that goal we set over 70 days ago, and I'm not gonna lie, this felt fantastic. I had actually given every weapon a fair chance, and I can officially say that I have a pretty damn holistic understanding of Spy and his unlocks and all of their nuances now. Of course, I'm far from mastering any of these weapons, and knives like the Eurotunnel Reward and guns like the Ambassador do have a lot of untapped potential which would require tens of thousands of kills to unlock, but at the very least, I felt confident in my ability to select any loadout as Spy at this point, and I know I'd be able to do a good job for my team. Also, I hope it now makes sense as to why this section goes to a very awkward day 71 instead of 69, as it took a little extra time to get both my Diamondback and Enforcer to 1000 kills, but it's whatever. Of course though, we're not done yet, and in fact, I think we're actually about to head into the most exciting part of the challenge now. There's no longer any restrictions over my head, I'm not forced to use particular weapons, like the Enforcer, and I can just use what I'm most comfortable with and get really, really good at it over the next 30 days. But we will discuss the loadout I ultimately decided on in the next section and explain some more things there. So for now, let's take a look at the numbers for this block of the challenge. I accumulated a total of 3,198 kills and died 1,395 times for a KD of 2.3, but We use so many different items in this block, so let's break it down further. From days 60 to 64, where I was still focusing on my backstabs, I had a KD of 2.39, which was really respectable. However, when I decided to exclusively use the Enforcer to farm kills as fast as possible, my KD actually jumped up even higher to 2.48, which just goes to show how insanely powerful the Dead Ringer and Spicicle synergy is when playing Gunspy. And finally, what was most surprising was when I swapped back to the Big Earner, Dead Ringer, and Diamondback on day 67, a loadout I had previously gotten a KD of 2.24 with back in days 30 to 39, I actually found my KD decreased to 2.15. I'm not sure if this was because I was focusing on gun kills more and therefore played worse, but I was actually shocked to see this, and it did mean I would have to spend a lot more time weighing up my final loadout for the challenge. My spy time increased from 188 hours and 22 minutes to 208 hours and 52 minutes for a total of 20 hours and 30 minutes, which was slightly more than I officially needed for this block of the challenge, but I was still 12 hours behind where I needed to be, which I was going to have to chase for this final month. Overall, I was pretty drained at this point in the challenge.
I was happy we'd finally ticked off all of Spy's weapons with the 1000 kills, but
this did mean I'd kinda lost a sense of direction for the challenge. Right now, all I had to focus on was getting to 280 hours and just trying to improve as much as possible, which isn't very tangible and meant that measuring progress was going to be a bit more underwhelming now. This did daunt me slightly, but to be honest, a part of me was really looking forward to this final stretch of the challenge where I could just try and master Spy as much as possible. Using one loadout exclusively and just getting as good as I possibly can in the next 30 days was really appealing to me. Now don't get me wrong, it was going to be an uphill battle playing for more than 3 hours every day with the exact same loadout for a month, but it was going to be well and truly worth it because I was about to start pulling off some genuinely insane plays in this final stretch as everything came together. So, with every spy weapon out the way at this point, we were left with the true freedom to pick whatever we thought would be the most optimal loadout for this final leg of the challenge and get really good with it. I will admit though that a good loadout is pretty subjective, but the main two criteria I needed my weapons to satisfy here is 1, the ability to maximize my KD as much as possible, and 2, preferably some room for some flashy plays with it. Now, to reveal to you the greatest spy loadout ever concocted, it would probably make the most sense to go in order of how they appear in your loadout slots, but I actually want to shake things up here and go the other way around, starting with the Sapper. Now, admittedly, there really isn't competition here. Your two options are 1, the perfectly fine and reliable stock Sapper, or 2, the worst thing ever made by a human being that I hate. Oh my god, is it so stupid. So yeah, we went with the Sapper here. No surprises about that one. Next up in the loadout was actually a choice I didn't really expect at the start of this challenge, but wow, did the Dead Ringer really grow on me over the 70 days of playing Spy. I remember the first block I used it during days 20 to 29 of the challenge, and I absolutely despised it because it completely changed how I had to approach playing Spy, and I was by no means a fan of this playstyle initially. However, as I sunk more and more time into it, I realized just how powerful of an option it was with all the defensive utility and that speed boost in particular. It seriously opens up so many avenues for crazy plays that you could only dream of with the stock Invis watch, and I knew I had to take it with me for my final loadout. Now, this is where things start to get interesting, because these last two slots have had a lot of serious competition, and there were so many great candidates to choose from. Earlier in that last block of the challenge, I mentioned that I was really tossing up between the Big Earner and the Kunai. At this point, both of them stood at around 3,000 kills each, meaning I had given them both a pretty fair opportunity to learn some of their deeper complexities, and to be honest, I really was in love with both of them. With the Dead Ringer equipped, I knew I wanted to play aggressively and go for a lot of trick stabs, because I'd always have that get out of jail free card in my back pocket whenever I needed it. The question was though, which of these two options gave me a better chance of getting more kills, while simultaneously dying less to maximize my KD as much as possible. And as much as I love that speed boost on the Big Earner and all the crazy potential that opens up, I think deep down I knew the Kunai was exactly what I needed. Now don't get me wrong, I actually prefer the Big Earner and think it is a much more fun option to play around with, but its biggest issue is that 100 HP threshold, which just leaves you super vulnerable. Now I know, the Kunai has a base of 70 HP, but it only takes one stab for you to gain the tankiness of a soldier, which gives you so much more breathing room when it comes to either escaping if things are too hot, or choosing to play even more aggressive when you want to secure some stabs. And again, this isn't to say the Big Earner is bad. Its ability to gap close between stabs is unrivaled and makes for super flashy plays, but I just don't think that speed boost is anywhere near as consistent as the Kunai's overheal. Plus, one of the biggest things I wanted to hone in on in this last stretch of the challenge was improving my ability to trick stab my way through bigger groups of enemies, and having my health refreshed on every stab is a way more reliable buff to have compared to the speed boost. The Big Earner definitely would have put some work in, but the Kunai was just too alluring, and I think it is the better option when it comes to maximizing my KD. Now, the final option we had to choose here was our revolver, and again, there was a lot of competition to sift through. There were two options I wanted to cross out immediately though, and that was firstly the Enforcer if I didn't make it obvious that I do not like this weapon throughout this video, and secondly the Ambassador, which I understand does have insane potential if you put in the time with it, but I don't think I was going to harness that in the remaining 30 days. This left us with three options: the stock revolver, the Lestrange, and the Diamondback. Now, this one is going to hurt, but I just knew I couldn't use the stock revolver. It's not a bad option, and when it comes to Gunspy specifically, it will always be my preferred choice, but this decision came because of my knife choice, the Kunai. I know I talked about this before, but if I'm ever at 70 HP, my odds of winning a duel with a revolver were really damn low. And on the flip side, if I had a nice overheal thanks to my Kunai, why would I go for a kill with my revolver when I have a lot more wiggle room to attempt more aggressive stabs? And it's actually this mindset which crossed off the Diamondback for me too, as even though I think it would definitely be a powerful option and could lead to a bunch of kills I wouldn't be able to secure otherwise, I still just know that if I'm ever overhealed after getting a stab, I'll just want to get more stabs to continue the chain. And I know this meant my revolver choice had to support my Kunai usage and not the other way around. So, with the power of deduction, this means I ultimately decided to go with the Lestrange. It's the only revolver choice that provides me with a passive buff, and this is majorly important if I'm using the Kunai. 40% more cloak duration extends the window I have to get into an optimal position once I use my Dead Ringer, and this again just gave me so much more breathing room to set up for a good play. Plus, something I really undervalued when making this choice is the cloak on hit the Lestrange rewards you with, which, holy shit, I really looked past how useful that is in conjunction with the Dead Ringer, but I'll talk about that more later on. So yeah, if you're looking at my loadout right now, you might be thinking, elmaxo, you NPC, this is literally just the spy main loadout. And yeah, you're right. After sinking so much time into this dashing French fellow, I now understand why so many people gravitate towards this combination of weapons, because each individual part complements the other items so damn nicely. There's a reason spy mains froth over it, and given that my brain rot condition was worsening by the day, I think it was time for me to accept the reality that I too had become a spy main myself throughout this challenge. The good thing about this loadout is that I already had a bunch of experience with the Kunai and Dead Ring it together, so there wasn't going to be much of an adjustment period, meaning I kind of just hit the ground running. The thing I found craziest about this block of the challenge was comparing my trick stabs from the beginning in the early days and seeing just how far they had come in around 3 months of practice. By far the biggest improvement I made overall was just how seamless my ability to hit a trick stab had become, and this applies to all the different variations. In the beginning, I felt as though I needed the perfect environment with an enemy walking directly towards me at a predictable speed if I wanted to have any hope of pulling something off like a Matador, but now, everything truly felt like second nature. One of the biggest reasons I insisted on using the Kunai over the Big Earner was because I wanted to hit those crazy chain trick stabs that all the cool spy mains do in their YouTube montages, and after 70 days of practice, I was actually starting to hit them. Take a look here on day 90 of the challenge on Badwater, where, yeah, okay, to point out the elephant in the room, it is the warm-up time, but hey, it's still a pretty cool play. Anyway, I hit a Matador on this Pyro, miss a swing at first, but then secure a second Matador on the Medic, and then yep, a third Matador on the Sniper. I'll take a look here on day 73 on Borneo, where I start things off with a simple stab on this clueless soldier, but then take my time because I have the overheal to line up my movement with the Sniper to get a Matador before getting a quick little reactive corner stab on the Scout as I move past him. These were the exact type of plays I wanted to improve at over the 100 days of this challenge, and the fact I could now consistently throw myself at a bigger group of enemies and actually had a chance of coming out on top was a really nice sense of progress. I will admit that I didn't get any of those actually insane clips where it's like one spy versus a fucking zombie horde of enemies and they don't mess up a single trick stab and manage to circle strafe everyone, but that might take 500 days of playing spy to pull off, so I'm pretty happy with what I was able to achieve. Another big way in which my trick stabs had improved was with my ability to both improvise on the fly and predict my enemy's movement better. Because I collected so much experience on spy at this point, something like 200 hours or more, I had a repertoire of knowledge on all the different maps, matchups, and situations I had been in. I could use them to guide myself to the most optimal play in the present. Take this clip for example from day 89 on Badwater, where the Scout activates my Dead Ringer, so I begin to run away, but notice he is following me. So rather than retreating like a coward, I hop up on this railing, wait a moment, and then jump over, correctly timing it to hit probably one of the most satisfying stair stabs I got in this entire challenge. Or take a look here on day 85 on Borneo, where I get a quick stab on this soldier as I pass this Pyro, and know he will be chasing me, so I go down the stairs, turn this corner, and mistime my stair stab on him, but I quickly readjust it as I land and strafe around him to secure a strafe stab instead. Being able to quickly adjust in the heat of the moment is the one thing which separates good spy players from the truly great ones, and although I definitely wouldn't call myself great, being able to improvise like this from time to time is again a really rewarding sense of progress compared to what I could do on day 1 of the challenge. I also noticed myself taking bigger risks with stair stabs in these later days as I used random props around the map like crates and railings more, with only slight height advantages to pull off some pretty impressive and way less predictable stabs. This was actually one of the most important things I realized too, as anyone could hit a corner stab on a clueless free-to-play pyro chasing you to the end of the earth, but when it comes to more competent players, you really have to start experimenting in ways they won't expect if you want to have any hope of actually securing a stab on them. Okay, look, this is all nice, you know, my trick stabs have come so far, but I do have a slight admission to make yet again. You know how I've been lying a lot in this video and withholding the truth from you for dramatic effect to help me structure this nightmare of a video that has almost 3,000 clips in it? Well, I gotta do it again, because I've actually neglected a certain type of trick stab for this entire video, and I just know the spy mains who are still watching have probably been banging their heads against their monitor waiting for me to talk about it. But I have very good news. You see, there is a holy grail when it comes to spy trick stabs. A type of stab which comfortably sits at the top of the tier list. If you've ever watched a spy montage, these feature in them quite prevalently because 1, they are perhaps the single most flashy play you can get on any class in TF2. 2, there is an insane amount of mechanical depth to executing it correctly because of how many moving parts there are all going on at once. And 3, there's also a significant amount of luck in finding the opportunity to actually pull them off. And it's not a very common situation you'll find yourself in. So look, let's just cut to the chase. At the very top of the food chain of all trick stabs sits the elusive surf stab, and it's something I'd actually spent the entire challenge up until this point trying to pull off. So the term surf stab is actually quite a broad definition because it encompasses a whole lot of things, some impressive and some less so, but the basic gist is that in TF2, damage applies knockback on you which you can use to move around, aka surfing. Now this isn't to be confused with surfing like you do in CSGO on those special maps, but I will admit it's a bit weird that they share a name given their drastically different mechanics, so I'll make sure to refer to it as damage surfing from here on out. It's a core mechanic to a class like Medic who can surf rockets and stickies to escape bad situations, and similarly, we can use it as Spy to get our ass to safety if we're ever in a pinch. We're basically treating the enemy's rocket, or whatever damage form it may be, like one of our own, and timing our jump as it hits us so that we can get a massive boost to either get the fuck out, or, if you're feeling a little ballsy, you can use it to go straight back in. Before we dive into the crazy, mind-boggling, insane surf stabs, I want to show you how practical surfing damage can be when it comes to playing Spy. Take a look at this clip from day 51 on Badwater, where I absolutely choke this stab on the medic and the heavy notices instantly. To maximize my chance of getting away, I jump and crouch repeatedly so that the bullets he's firing from his minigun push me away faster, and then use the extra distance I've traveled to actually get a stab on this soldier. Or again, here on day 27 on Snowy Coast, I unintentionally get launched by a rocket after this stab, which boosts me straight into this demo man to get the freest kill of my Spy career. Now, yes, I know the second clip wasn't intentional, but it just goes to show how powerful surfing can be as a gap closer. This is one of the biggest reasons I loved using the big earner, as that speed boost meant I could continue chain stabs over longer distances, but because we weren't running it anymore, you have to resort to mechanics like this to give yourself the best chance of getting stabs. Now, to be honest, my hundreds of hours on Soldier were definitely coming in clutch in this regard, as I have spent almost a decade now at this point rocket jumping, which unsurprisingly carries a lot of transferable skills over to surfing other people's rockets and explosives, so this mechanic on Spy did click pretty naturally for me. But as you're probably aware, the stabs I've been showing aren't anything too crazy, and I was rattling on about how these are the creme de la creme of Spy stabs, so let me show you an example of what an actually crazy surf stab looks like. Yeah, I know, it's pretty wild, and that's like the coolest shit I've maybe ever seen, and I wanted to do it myself. So in the back of my mind throughout this entire challenge, I was always on the prowl for a situation where I could make it happen, leading to one very exhaustive hunt for a flashy surf stab which had a whole lot of fail attempts. Oh, that was almost such a clip! No, I almost actually hit my first super cool clip. No, I was gonna surf stab. No, what? No! Oh! No, that was it!
No, that was almost a surf stab again, but I screwed it up. I botched it.
Oh, yes, yes, yes! No! He moved! That was the surf stab. That was it. It keeps happening. It keeps getting so close. Oh. No! The prophecy. The prophecy. As you can see by my audible suffering, the process thus far had been pretty brutal. For all those attempts, I didn't have the kunai equipped, which is almost a prerequisite for hitting a surf stab, as it makes it a whole lot safer jumping from an enemy's rocket if you have a bunch of overheal, reducing your chance of dying immediately or as you take full damage on the way down. There had been so many close calls over 2.5 months of attempts, but I just knew I had to get at least one kinda cool looking surf stab before everything was said and done with this challenge, and luckily for me, on a beautiful autumn morning on day 70 75, I was defending a spy on Hoodoo, and the stars finally aligned. If my reaction where I was howling like a wolf didn't make it obvious, I was elated. That one was 75 days in the making, and oh my god, it almost didn't happen because that soldier's rocket took me down to literally 1 HP. If he had been slightly more precise with his rocket, I would have exploded into pieces and we never would have witnessed the one genuinely impressive thing I had done in this entire challenge. Also, I won't lie to you, after I hit this one cool surf stab, I drastically decreased the amount of them I went for because I wanted to maximize my KD, and they are extremely risky to pull off, but hey, I'm thankful I have at least 1 or 2 clips to show for all my effort. But hey, you know what? I think the kunai and all the trick stabbing is getting a bit too much of the spotlight here for the final stretch of the challenge. Don't get me wrong, it's the most crucial element to playing Spy by far, but there are 2 other important parts to my loadout which are also essential to facilitating this aggressive playstyle I had adopted, and I think we should give them a bit more love, starting with the Dead Ring. I know I mentioned it before, but when I picked this up for the first time, I remember hating it. I specifically remember how much I despised using it on offense when pushing into last, as on maps like Barmblitz I had absolutely no idea how to make it work, and I genuinely thought I was going to end up using the stock invis watch by the end of the challenge, as I know a lot of spy mains I talk to regularly say it's their favorite. But then I kind of just kept using it. After every day of playing Spy, I found myself loving the Dead Ringer just that little bit more, and as I continued to improve with it and recognize the situations it worked best in, it kind of led to this crazy positive feedback loop, where by day 50 I was almost certain it was going to be the option I took into the final days of the challenge. There is a whole lot to love when it comes to the Dead Ringer, but by far what made me love it almost unconditionally is that beautiful speed boost, which just opens up so many avenues to play more aggressively. Take a look at this clip on day 74 on Harvest, where I pop my Dead Ringer and decloak relatively quickly and use the speed boost to immediately hunt down the scout for a really easy stab. Or here on day 76 on Dust Bowl, I pop my Dead Ringer going up the staircase and use the speed to quickly jump the gap and strafe stab this demo man before they're even able to comprehend the play I'm pulling. This gets even crazier when you realize that you're actually able to prolong the speed boost of the Dead Ringer after it fades by hitting B-hops, which led me to this absolutely insane play on Steel on day 83, where I get a stab on this cute little fanboy before popping the Dead Ringer, where I maintain the speed boost even after it fades by hitting 3 B-hops in a row, leading to a super clean high speed stab on this enemy spy. One of the other things I really started to learn with the Dead Ringer in these later days of the challenge was how important timing your decloak is. There's this interesting balance you have to strike with the Dead Ringer, as if you take damage and decide to pop it, you have to balance 2 factors simultaneously. One, you need to make sure you escape and survive, so you want to use the invis for as long as possible to ensure that you get to a safe position, but 2, you also want to minimize the downtime of your Dead Ringer by decloaking as soon as possible to reduce how long its recharge time is, and can therefore get back into the action as fast as possible. If you use your Dead Ringer to tank 1 bit of damage and decloak immediately, it'll be out of action for 10 seconds, but if you make use of the full charge to ensure you get away safely, this means you'll have to wait an additional 10 seconds on top of that, which can leave you out of the game for a really long time. This is of course exacerbated by the fact you can't use ammo packs to replenish your charge either. It is what it is. Secondly, I touched on this before, but there can be a lot of downtime waiting for your charge to come back, which can leave you playing super passive at times. Thirdly, you have to make sure you proc your Dead Ringer first, then disguise, otherwise you leave a trail of smoke, which is common knowledge, but I found myself screwing this up more than I'd like to admit. And finally, the damage resistance isn't always enough to save your ass, especially when it comes to something like random crits, which will absolutely obliterate you if you're not careful. I'll also mention here, but the Lachrange synergizes really nicely with the Dead Ringer, and I found myself taking long distance pot shots when I was out of charge, just to reduce how long my downtime out of combat was, and this really helped in keeping up a constant level of pressure on the enemy team. By day 75, I actually got my Dead Ringer to Hail Zone, and I can now safely say that it is truly one of my favorite items in all of TF2. I definitely don't think it's overpowered either, though I understand why it's kind of innately annoying to play against, because it does make you an absolute pain in the ass for the enemy team to deal with, especially if you're anything like me, who is decloaking on cooldown to make sure it's up as much as possible. Either way though, it's an awesome concept for a weapon, and I had an absolute blast getting better with it. Now, you'd probably think at this point in the challenge where I'd been playing so much Spy that it would get pretty monotonous and boring at times, right? Well, yeah, no, it definitely did. We'll talk about that in a second, but the thing that's so beautiful about this game is that it still found ways of surprising me even in these later stages where I wanted to smack my head against the wall sometimes, and I actually want to run you through some of those now. It may sound a little bit weird at first, but in this block of the challenge especially, I actually picked up a gambling addiction. Now, I know what you're thinking. elmaxo, what does this have to do with anything? Did you like start unboxing crates after every death to try and get unusuals and keep yourself entertained, or what? And no, actually. I found a way more wholesome version of gambling that became one of my biggest sources of fun, whilst I was kinda losing my mind during the challenge, and it's all to do with enemy teleporters. You see, I realized that if I got behind the entire enemy team, I'd often have access to their teleporter entrances at their spawn room, and as a spy, you're actually able to take them. And so I realized that if I was ever getting bored or fed up with how things were going, I actually had a virtual slot machine at my disposal, which I could use to throw myself into a really chaotic situation and try to work my way out of for a little bit of spontaneous fun. Here on day 75 on Upward, I make my way behind the red team and wait for the teleporter, but luckily get a quick stab on this medic as they spawn, which gives me a good overheal as I take the telly, leading to a stab on an Engie, sniper, soldier, and even a Lestrange kill too. Or here from a bit earlier in the challenge on Thunder Mountain, I take the telly, even saying to myself,
oh fuck it, where we go,
before picking up an absolutely beautiful quadruple kill with the big earner. I honestly think this was a good habit to pick up, as I realized that what separates the good spies from the great spies is the ability to act on your feet and make use of your environment. So dropping yourself into some absolute chaos which you have no control over is a great way at improving your improvisational skills. But remember, this is teleporter gambling, and if you know anything about gambling, there is the potential to lose everything, and yeah, don't you worry, it happened quite a bit. Sometimes you'll get your ass handed to you, but that's why it's so fun. You know, it's like normal gambling, where you can either make a bunch of money, or lose everything you've ever accumulated in life as you continue to feed your parasitic addiction, which drains you of everything you value and love. Now, it wasn't just teleporter gambling which got me through these final hours, because there was a bunch of other stuff too. I think one of my other absolute favorites had to be interacting with enemy spies. Now, there's a bit of a duality to this, as whenever you come across an enemy spy whilst you're sneaking on the backline, it can go one of two ways. You'll either make a new best friend for life, as you both bond over the fact you are the weakest class in the game and don't really want to fuck each other over any harder than you have to, or you'll trigger a primal reaction in their brain as both of you engage in a metaphorical dick measuring contest where you find out who the better trick stabber is, and yeah, most of the time, it was me. I don't think I can articulate to you how absolutely satisfying it is to see some enemy spy who thinks they're the absolute shit try to go for a stair stab on you, thinking they'll actually pull it off, just for you to readjust your movement and trick stab their trick stab. It is like the ultimate way of asserting dominance on enemy spies, and my ego lives for moments like that, because I'm an insecure little bitch who thrives on being the better player in a 15-year-old video game that nobody cares about in the real world. Now, admittedly, I did get my ass handed to me by much better spies a fair few times. I don't know if I have any clips of it to put here because, you know, when you get absolutely shat on by an enemy spy, my first reaction isn't, oh, I need to clip that for the point in the video where I talk about spies who are better than me. It's actually more of a staring blankly at my ceiling for 20 seconds as I reconsider all of my life decisions type thing, so unfortunately, I don't think I have much footage of it actually happening. I will say generally that when I knew a spy was better than me, there was a pretty low chance I'd go for a trick stab unless I was super confident in my abilities. Usually, I would just resort to my revolver, which is the logical thing to do against a better player, but unfortunately, it's a very fast way to bring out the inner toxicity out of an opposing spy mate. Anyway, the final joy I want to talk about during this monotonous stretch of grinding was making people themselves. Wait, hold on, no, not like that. You see, the combination of the Kunai, which gives overheal, and the Dead Ringer, which gives you all those defensive resistances, means you are in a good position to make enemy goobers explode themselves with their own rockets, pipes, and stickies. All you have to do is start breaching their personal space and make them feel claustrophobic by hugging their hitbox, and voila! You can secure some pretty unconventional kills by making trigger-happy demo man regret ever pressing mouse 1 in your vicinity. Admittedly, you may find yourself going down with them at times, but I think the silliness of the situation makes it worth it. Also, in a similar vein, I kept getting owned by rocket jumping soldiers who had literally no idea I was near them, and this was one of the few ways of dying which actually made me laugh. So here's a little hypercut of that. Anyway though, I mentioned it a bit in the last block of the challenge, but the mental side of things was definitely eating away at me at this point of the challenge. The first 2 weeks weren't too bad in this grind, and I was progressing at a nice pace, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't losing my patience with everything. I had to forcefully drag myself to my PC to play each and every day, and it was usually at a time of day where my friends weren't around because they're not full-time YouTubers who can't afford to play TF2 at 11 AM on a Thursday, so a lot of this was done in solitude, and that is the last thing you need when you're hating every second of playing the game. It was super mentally taxing, and playing a class like Spy, who I know I've said 100 times now, is so dependent on so many external variables going in your favor, it just really stacks up. Around day 90, I kind of realized that I was just going through the motions of playing Spy instead of actively trying to improve with every session. All I wanted to do was get through my 3 hours as quickly as possible so I could go and do something else, and I realized that wasn't what the challenge was about. I was so close to the end, and the fact that I wasn't valuing every moment as an opportunity to get better undermined the whole point point of doing this challenge, so I realized that I needed to have a mindset shift moving into these final days. It's not like I was playing poorly or anything, far from it actually. My KD was still progressing higher and higher, and I felt like I was still improving, but it was definitely starting to stagnate as I became much more focused on just putting in the hours rather than improving at every given opportunity. And so, I wanted to change that. You might have noticed that the structure for this block of the challenge is a little bit weird going from day 72 through to 93, but it's actually for a specific reason. I came to a realization that I had to give it my all for the final week, as I know I would regret looking back on this whole challenge if I spent my final days just trying to squeeze out every minute of playtime possible to tick over that 280 hour mark instead of actively trying to improve. And so, before we dive onto the true final stretch of the challenge, let's take a look at this block's stats. I accumulated a total of 5,394 kills and died 2,128 times for a KD of 2.53, which I was super happy with, but I knew we could bump it up a bit more. I started this block with 208 hours and 52 minutes and finished it with 263 hours and 56 minutes for a total of just over 55 hours. I really picked it up again in this block because I had fallen behind significantly when it came to my in-game time, so I was happy we had started clawing back some progress. This meant I was going to need just over 16 hours of play for these final 7 days, which is definitely more than attainable. There are a few achievements I hit in this block of the challenge too, like on day 83 where I broke LeBron James' scoring record on my strange beard, my Kunai hit the second highest rank of Australian on day 91, and I even managed to get 105 points in one round on Upward, which was an absolutely insane record. But alright, with a positive shift in my mental, I went into this last week as a challenge, prepared to give it my absolute all. I had been playing Spy almost every day for over 3 months at this point, and it might be controversial to say, but I think I'd actually learned a fair bit about this conniving Frenchman up until this point. I was basically treating this final week as a way to exhibit my skills and show just how far I had come since those humble beginnings in day 1. In the third block of the challenge from days 20 to 29, I used this same Kunai, Deadringer, and Lestrange combo and had a KD of 1.85, so my main goal for this 7 days was to beat that number by as much as humanly possible to show you how far I had come since then, and I was feeling super confident about it all. The mental reset was exactly what I needed to power through this remaining week of the challenge, as I had definitely gotten in my own head about how tedious and boring it had all become, so by putting things into perspective with the fact there was only 7 days left, it really made me value my time more, and playing the game felt less like a chore, and once again became an experience I was enjoying. Unsurprisingly, when you convince yourself you hate something, you tend to do worse at it as a byproduct too, and this is exactly what had happened to the quality of my Spy gameplay for the last week or two, which I felt as though it stagnated significantly. Going into each day with a negative mindset meant I was more impatient with the plays I went for, was quicker to get angry when things didn't go my way, and therefore I made a lot more errors and poor decisions. Now, that's not to say every second of this last stretch was a cakewalk, you know, random crits and brain-dead teammates will always test my mental fortitude, but it was definitely a significant improvement. It also reminded me of a mindset I used to have when I played, oh, sorry for bringing this up, but League of Legends. If you don't know how League works, firstly, congratulations, and secondly, you are basically at the mercy of how well your teammates perform. Once you realize this and you learn about 40% of your games are just always going to be losses, it makes dealing with defeat a whole lot easier, and I started to bring this into my Spy gameplay. You know, I wasn't going to pop off insanely hard every single life, I wasn't always going to be able to steamroll through my enemies, and some lives, my team was just going to be horrific, or their team was just going to be insanely talented. You can't control this, and I know I spent so much time in previous sections rattling on about how frustrating these external factors are to play into, but ultimately, they're out of your domain of control. Your gameplay quality only begins to tank if you let things like random crits and incessant spy checking get to your mental. It's this negative feedback loop where something bullshit will happen, which makes you upset, which therefore makes you less rational in your gameplay decisions and more impatient, which therefore makes you more susceptible to even more bullshit occurring, which just repeats the vicious cycle. This mindset is honestly applicable to everything in life and sounds like something I talk about on my self-help channel, but to be honest with you, this last week of playing Spy really demonstrated to me the power of PMA, aka positive mental attitude. You will forever be at the mercy of Valve's casual matchmaking system, and nothing is going to change that, so getting frustrated by brain-dead teammates does nothing but hinder your own experience. Every player who is better than you is always a new opportunity to learn something and improve at the game, so rather than dreading those times where you're up against the Prem level Pyro with over 20,000 hours and has seemingly never made a wrong tactical decision in the heat of a game before, you can use it as a chance for growth. People will probably call this cringe about a video game, but if you genuinely want to improve, it's only going to happen the more you put yourself in difficult situations where you actually have to think outside the box and experiment with your gameplay. I know it can be hard to be perfect with your mindset all the time, as you might have a bad day, or I don't know, you might have been playing Spy almost every day for 3 months and were getting kind of a little fed up with it, but the more you're able to ground yourself in this kind of growth mindset, the better things will be for you. To quote Brian Tracy, you cannot control what happens to you, but you can control your attitude towards what happens to you. And in that, you will be mastering change rather than allowing it to master you. How cute is that? But okay, my motivational self-help talk about the importance of mindset in TF2 is officially over. I was really blown away with my ability to chain trick stabs together here in the final week of the challenge, and it was one of the key things I wanted to be able to pull off by the end of 100 days. I was by no means perfect at it and didn't get anything more than a triple, but hey, that's a whole lot better relative to where things started on day 1, where I kept whipping out my disguise kit and sapper whenever I got into a stressful situation. I talked about it a lot in the previous section, but I finally felt comfortable as Spy in basically any situation I found myself in. Having the safety net of the Dead Ringer along with the potential for massive overheal with the Kunai just gives you a layer of confidence in your ability to handle those bigger groups of enemies, and I was actually looking more and more forward to those super stressful situations where I was swarmed by a larger group of foes. I definitely wouldn't emerge victorious every time, as unsurprisingly, 100 days isn't a long enough period to absolutely master a class in TF2, but I back myself more often than I did. This was especially the case for 1v1s where I was overwhelmingly confident in my ability to execute something simple like a stair stab, corner stab, or matador, as it was basically second nature at this point when it came time to pull them off. There was also an exciting moment on day 95, and although this wasn't a goal I formally set out to complete when I started the challenge, it was really exciting to see my Kunai finally hit the highest strange rank in the whole game. Oh my god, here we are. That's it! That's it, baby! Hail Zone! My virginity has regrown. I feel compelled to go watch some anime right now. We lose the game, but there it is. As you can gauge with my reaction, it did feel like I reached a point of no return, because I would now formally be categorized as a person who is lame enough to get a strange kunai to Hail Zone, which is some intense emotional baggage I'm gonna have to cope with for the remainder of my life on this planet. And to be honest with you, I don't really want to drag this last week out. Now, don't get me wrong, these last 7 days were by far the best I had played in this whole challenge. Seeing the amount of progress I had made since day 1 was genuinely mind-blowing, as every facet of my Spy gameplay had improved so significantly. It was crazy to think that 3 months ago I was fat-fingering to the wrong weapon during intense duels and was consistently failing to hit simple backstabs on enemies who weren't even moving that much versus where we were now. I mean, I of course knew that to some extent I would become a much better Spy player over this challenge, but for such a short period of time in the grand scheme of things, I was genuinely blown away by what I was able to accomplish. Now, that's not to say it had been easy up until this point. I mean, playing 3 hours of Spy every day for over 3 months was an incredibly mentally draining process. I really am not proud of how impatient I got at times during this, and I really do wish I could go back and keep up a more positive mindset throughout the entirety of the challenge. But still, to see me go from struggling to strafe around enemies to pull off a basic matador to literally flying through the sky off of an enemy's rocket to backstab them was such a jarring transition, and it truly made all the hardship worth it. It made waking up to play 3 hours of TF2's weakest class worth it. It made all those shitty games with bad teammates and spy checking pyros worth it. It made dying to all the random crits from gibbous soldiers on the other side of the map worth it, and yes, it definitely made all those failed surf stab attempts worth it. So instead of dragging things out any longer than they need to be, I want you to watch the end of my final game of the entire challenge. This was the match which would tick my Spy time over that 280 hour mark, and it quite fittingly took place on Frontier, the map which had become my absolute favorite to play Spy on. Oh, well, that was slightly anticlimactic. And I think with that, if we go and check our backpack, see our 280 hours and 1 minute, it's all done. Spy is finished. 100 days of Spy, absolutely done. Oh, Christ. 200 hours of in-game time on Spy, and what have I learnt? God, this class is frustrating. That is first and foremost, if I haven't highlighted that. What an experience. I had a great time. I really think it's honestly worth maining a new class. I think it's worth giving it a shot if you haven't. Give it a try, see how you feel, and you think you learn a lot about TF2. But with that, I have formally finished playing Spy. And that means tomorrow I don't have to get up and play 3 hours of Spy because I've done it for 100 days. But thank you for making this fun in the video. I'll probably have some more reflections and outro. I might even include this, but damn, 100 days of Spy, it's over, it's complete, I've learned a damn lot, and fuck am I glad it's over. So, I'll see you later. And there we had it. I had officially ticked off my 2 goals for this 100-day challenge. Namely, 1, reach 280 hours of in-game time on Spy, and 2, get 1,000 kills on every weapon. It had been a pretty massive journey filled with a roller coaster of emotion, and I'm not gonna act like I was elated to finish this challenge. If anything, it was more a sense of overwhelming relief. I was very much looking forward to the fact I no longer had to boot up TF2 every day just to play Spy for 3 hours against my will, because to be honest with you, it had sucked out some of my passion for the game, and I was just looking forward to actually playing TF2 when I genuinely wanted to. So, before we dive into some of my thoughts about the challenge, let's take a look at the numbers. My hours in TF2 had gone up by 324 from a total of 4,043 on the 12th of December 2022 up to 4,367 on the 3rd of April 2023. You may notice this is 113 days in total, not 100, and that's because I did miss the occasional day when I was busy, and I think I did have like 3 or 4 mental health break days in there when I just couldn't bring myself to open TF2. For this last 7-day stretch of the challenge, I accumulated a total of 1,357 kills and died 496 times for a KD of 2.74, which was well and truly my highest to date, and I was super happy we managed to get it that high. As for the challenge in total, we got 22,534 kills and died 9,707 times for a total KD of 2.32, which is honestly feels a bit higher than what I expected. I think this does make sense with how well I played from day 70 onwards, where I really came into my element, but I suspect it would be something more like 2.1 or 2.2 as an average for the whole challenge. I will admit that there could be some slight errors and omissions in my calculations because I manually recorded my kills and deaths after literally every game I played on a Google Doc, so I might have input something wrong here or there, but for the most part, I think those numbers should be good. We also reached a total of 47,807 points, meaning I averaged about 500 a day whilst playing in this challenge, meaning I have well and truly put LeBron James' scoring record to shame, unless he continues to have superhuman seasons with the Lakers at the ripe old age of 40. So before we close out this video, I want to take you through some of my biggest takeaways from this challenge and some of the things I have been reflecting on since it started, and that all starts with something really important. Number 1. A high KD does not mean you are a good spy. Now, measuring progress as you get better in a game like TF2 can be pretty damn hard. On classes like Sniper or Scout, you can track your progress in something like AimLab or Kovacs to objectively see how much more accurate you're becoming, but outside of that, there aren't really that many metrics to use. Now, as you've seen throughout this entire video, I did end up settling on the kill-death ratio as the main statistic I was going to use, but in all honesty, it wasn't a great one. But don't get me wrong, it tracks what it tracks well. As the challenge progressed, I was dying less and killing more, starting off with a KD of 1.83 and getting all the way up to a peak of 2.74, which is an improvement of just under 50%. Now don't get me wrong, this is fantastic and definitely displays a great level of improvement. However, my issue is that there is a whole lot more to consider when it comes to the Conniving Frenchman. You see, as Spy, you are a support class who has insane pick potential in a similar way to something like a Sniper. With one single play, you have the ability to flip an entire game by getting a crucial stab on a medic with Uber or coordinating a sap play on the enemy engineer's nests. But generally, these game-changing plays you'll make won't be reflected in your kills and deaths or any number for that matter. If anything, your KD should be relatively smaller if you are prioritizing things like sapping teleporters and going for important picks rather than just farming through as many enemies as humanly possible. One thing I haven't even mentioned in this video up until this point is stab priority and who you should be targeting, and that's because I was operating under the pretense that I needed to maximize my KD to show tangible progress, meaning I just wanted as many stabs as possible no matter who they were on. Like, yes, I got a shit ton of kills through this challenge, but how many of them were game altering? Of course, at some point, quantity does override quality with stabs, but how often was I actually targeting the sniper who was shutting down my entire team with one sightline? Or how often was I going for the medic when they had Uber to prevent my team from getting rolled? I just didn't place enough importance on these massive plays you're capable of pulling off as Spy, and ultimately, if I am to do another 100-day challenge, I definitely need to factor in some new stats like win percentage or other important metrics specific to a class I'm playing, like medics killed as sniper, or allied healing on my strange sandwich as heavy. Ultimately, a good spy is one who wins the game for their team, and whilst yes, the way I farmed through servers and got massive kill streaks was definitely useful to my team's victory, I just don't think I gave enough time to appreciate the other metrics which define a good spy player, so I'll know that for whichever class I pick next. The second thing I want to talk about is choosing Spy as the first class to test this video format was probably a major mistake. So I went into this 100-day challenge because I genuinely wanted to improve at Spy and see what all the trick stab hype was about. I'd never been that good at it, so I finally thought a video like this would be a good excuse to actually upskill myself, and look, those were some good intentions going into this challenge with, but fuck, man. I don't know how you spy mains do it, because this class is the most frustrating to play by far. I know I made a big point of it throughout the video, but your reliance on external factors is just so genuinely infuriating at times. So much of the game is out of your control, and you are often at the mercy of the quality of your enemies and how often they spy check to be a useful part to your team. On a class like Soldier, it doesn't matter how good the enemy team is, because I know how to position myself such that I will be useful and can still find myself racking up kills, but on Spy, it feels like you just can't do anything in certain situations. Maybe this is a byproduct of a lack of experience, but god, the amount of people who would just luckily flick and turn around the frame before I was about to stab them, or would randomly spy check an unsuspecting corner of the map. Look, to quote the great Kanye West, that right there could drive a sane man berserk. Of course, I had no idea this would be the case when I went into the challenge, but I wish I started on something like, I don't know, Demo Man, a generalist who is useful all the time instead of the absolute weakest class in the game who's only useful in a handful of niche situations. I guess it's good I got Spy out the way first if I do decide to do another 100-day challenge, and to be honest, although it was really challenging for my mental, that did also make it extremely rewarding by the end of it, so maybe I shouldn't be complaining. The third thing I want to talk about is feeling yourself improve at something is awesome. Now, if you don't know me as a person, I'm very big into self-help. And though it might be cringe and lame to some of you, but I literally have a channel dedicated to it because I love the idea of progressing as a human being and constantly improving yourself through life in every aspect. And I found a lot of that whilst playing Spy. I can't really explain to you how fulfilling it is to start hitting those harder stabs more consistently, landing in the correct position for a stair stab more often, or absolutely reading your opponent like a book for a massive predictive play. These highlights really make the process of improvement so damn exciting, and I think the biggest example of that in this video was the surf stab I hit on day 75, which, as you could see by my reaction, was easily the most elated I felt in the entire challenge. I'm pretty sure I want to revisit the 100-day format with another class soon, because seriously, getting really damn good at something over a given period of time is super fulfilling, and the fact it won't have to be on the weakest class in the game next time around, it does make it a lot more bearable. At least I hope. The fourth thing I want to talk about is I have a newfound respect for spy mains. I know I talked about this a little bit in the video at times, but wow, Spy is a super mentally draining class with very complex mechanics that are really hard to pull off. I remember always thinking that so much of Spy was luck and hitting face stabs, but no. I think through my 22,000 kills, maybe 30 to 40 of them were face stabs that I didn't have any intention of pulling off. I suppose I wasn't interp abusing, and I don't really want to open that can of worms now, but I can safely say that I massively overestimated how often good spies hit face stabs. I know it might seem like bullshit in the moment, but I would encourage you to be more charitable the next time a spy outplays you. More often than not, they just use good movement and game sense to get the advantage over you, and it actually means a lot saying nice stab in chat every once in a while if they really caught you off guard. Also, I kinda understand why spy mains are so toxic, not that it excuses them, but when you dedicate thousands and thousands of hours to a class where there is so much bullshit, I mean, yeah, I kinda get it, so you have slightly more of my respect to Spy players. The fifth thing I want to talk about is that almost all of Spy's weapons are really damn viable. Barring the red tape recorder, and to be honest, I feel like someone in the comments is going to leave a PhD dissertation on how it's secretly broken and that I'm actually a massive moron for not using it, but I think every one of Spy's weapons actually serve a great function in specific situations. The Kunai is great for chaining stabs together, the Big Earner is good for closing the gap and hitting speedy trick stabs, the Spy Skill is great in conjunction with Gun Spy or if you want to play safely, and the Eurotunnel reward is surprisingly effective against more competent players due to that silent kill or when you want to get stabs with a lot of engineers around. It is a bit different with the revolvers, where I think something like the Enforcer, which isn't necessarily a terrible unlock, it definitely needs some type of makeover just because it fits into such a strange position that doesn't really make a lot of sense. I also think the Ambassador needs that damage fall off looked at because, oh my god, was it sad to hit 54 damage headshots on enemies who weren't even that far away from me. Outside of those exceptions though, I think Spy potentially has one of the most well-balanced kits in the game, as each unlock actually serves a specific use and shines in certain situations, which I can't say about other classes. Like, come on, when am I ever going to use the Liberty Launcher as Soldier? I really like where Spy's unlocks are, and it made getting 1,000 kills on each weapon a lot of fun, except the Enforcer, but I've given that poor thing too much shit throughout this whole video, so we'll let him be for now. And finally, by far the most important thing I took out of this challenge was number 6, don't have a tower fan within punching distance of your desk. I love the fan I had, man. I used it for 2 years at this point, and when I gave it that final kill blow on like day 90 and it just stopped producing a breeze for me, a small part of me died with it, so I want to dedicate this entire video to my boy who is unfortunately no longer with us. If you've made it this far in the video, please comment RIP elmaxo's fan and I will give you a free heart react for your dedication to somehow watching all of this. There we have it. That has been everything I have learned and experienced after playing the Conniving Frenchman for 100 days. Thank you so much for making it this far. I have no idea how long this video will be, but given my script is almost at 50,000 words now, I'm guessing this could be a bit of a long one. Seriously though, this project has been my entire life for the past 4 months, and I will have sunk something like 6 or maybe even 700 hours into it when all is said and done, so I really appreciate you making it all the way through. I will use this as an opportunity to remind you to join the Discord for that giveaway we've got going on, and I also have a Patreon if you want to support me there. Also check me out on Instagram at elmaxo_swag so I can pick up baddies with my clout, and also check my Twitter out with the same handle for some elite tier shit posting. I'm also going to freestyle this in here. I'm actually making a second channel which I'm going to use to launch with this video. I'm going to post every trick stab I hit, and it's just going to function as somewhere I can post shit posts on TF2 or maybe some lower effort content on other games. So yeah, make sure you sub to that, and I'll leave a link to that down below. Thank you so much again. I really hope you've enjoyed my downward spiral into spy insanity, and I will let you know that I do have at least one more 100-day challenge video like this planned, no matter how well it happens to perform in the algorithm, because there is one Australian hitman I'd love to spend some time getting good at. But for now, thank you so much for watching, God bless you, and have a good rest of your day.